By the time the last of the candles guttered low in the Tower of the Hand, Eddard Stark knew he had already chosen. He had not slept. Sleep would have been a mercy, and mercies were seldom given in King's Landing. The heat in that city did not recede by night. It clung like a damp hand, and the courtyards held the day's breath even in the small hours, and the walls remembered every whisper. He stood by the narrow window with its iron lattice and watched the torch spangles drift far below along the inner bailey, the steady tide of light and shadow that told him where men walked and where power did not. He could smell the sea through the stone, salt, tar, dead kelp, and beneath it the closeness of the city, the faint rot that nested in the gutters and the sweet smoke of street braziers where bakers stoked their ovens and fishmongers seared yesterday's catch for the poorest bellies. There had been a time when that melange would have offended him outright. Winterfell had been clean in the way the North was clean, its smells earned and honest. Horse and hay, wool grease, wood smoke, the iron of snow. Here everything was too near to everything else. Here every breath carried a secret. On the table behind him lay the parchment to Stannis, its words tight and plain, sealed with the dire wolf. On another lay Robert's will, the one Robert had not called a will, only a letter to give his friend the authority he said he did not want. Protector of the realm, the king's words said, and even dying Robert had smiled at the jest of writing my heir, where Ned had forced him to write Joffrey. Ned had corrected it before the ink was dry, the quill scratching like a crow. The wax had cooled hard and red like frozen blood. That wax, and the seal that made it, had trapped him more surely than any chain. The chair creaked behind him. Fat Tom shifted his weight from one sore foot to the other and cleared his throat softly. He had taken off his helmet to mop at his brow with the back of his sleeve. The heat made the leather stink. Tommard had loyal eyes, brown and wet, like a good dog's. They sought Ned's back now, waiting. Lord Renly has not returned, Tom muttered, not quite a question. He will, Ned said, though he had no certainty of it. Renly Baratheon had sat in that chair an hour before with Loras Tyrell at his shoulder, silver bright and smiling and far too young to hide his disdain for slow men and slower scruples, and begged for permission to move. We have the numbers. My men are ready. The Queen and her children. Take them now. Hold them and the Lannisters will not dare. Call Stannis when you've done. Make the small council kneel to law while they still have knees. He had spoken quick, as if speed itself were proof, as if swiftness could conjure righteousness into existence. Ned had looked at the boy beside him with his smooth face and delicate hands and felt old and weary and so full of Winterfell that the walls seemed to recede. He had said no to Renly once. That refusal had been like a stone struck loose on a snowy slope. It had begun to roll, and everything with it. But the slope was not long, not yet. And there were stones one could still set one's shoulder to if one was willing to be bruised beneath them. When Renly had come again tonight without mummery, without floral perfumes clinging to the cloth, without half the court in his wake, Ned had nodded grimly instead of shaking his head. I will not break the law, he had told him once. And again, I will not spill the blood of children. Neither oath was broken by what he had chosen. He would not spill their blood. He would keep them safe with his own if need be. He would not break the law, he would assert it. That was the face the choice wore when he grasped it. And if there was some other face that only Catelyn might have seen, only his sister might have named, he would not turn it over to look. Tommard looked to the door when footsteps approached. Desmond Dyson, short, square, silent, slid inside with barely a sound and closed the timber softly behind him. His dark hair glistened in the candlelight. The men are set, my lord, he said. Half in the Godswood at Maegor's Holdfast, half in the covered way beneath the Queen's Tower. Lord Renly's knights took the postern by the kitchens as you wished. They sent for the Master of Keys. He came quicker than I liked. Ned turned. And the city watch? Desmond made a face that belonged on a butcher. The gold cloaks blink when you look at him. Slint was not at the barracks when the boy went to draw him out. His man, Alardeem, the one with a boil by his ear, says the Lord Commander is visiting his sick mother. I never saw a man visit so late. Slint is with Littlefinger, Tom grumbled, or in the Queen's cellars. Perhaps. Ned moved to the table and picked up the seal once more, heavy as a cold coal. We do not rely on Janos Slint. He would have preferred the city watch with him at dawn, to give the act the breadth of the city's own consent, but the city belonged to whichever man could pay its wage for 3 days together. Littlefinger had the keys to that coffer. Renly had hinted at Tyrell purses if coin were needed. Coin would be needed, always. Ned had given Desmond orders nonetheless. Hold the armories. Lock the river gate that emptied below the mint. Secure the doors to the Great Hall and the council chamber. Post men at the Ravens. Where is Arya? Ned asked then, because he had kept the worst for last. In her bed, Tom said doubtfully. At least she was when Syrio took her. Awake? Ned asked, and Tom's mouth moved left as if he had bitten down on a seed. Syrio says she sleeps with one eye open now, Tom muttered. Like a cat. And Sansa? Ned kept his voice steady. Tom scrubbed his face again. Crying, he said. She misses the prince. Ned closed his eyes for a 3 count in the manner Maester Luwin had taught him when he was a boy of 10 and his little brother had a fever that no herb could ease. The act did nothing to ease the ache, but it contained it within a space where words could pass over it without stumbling. Keep them close, he said. No one in or out. If Varys himself offers song and figs, turn him away. As you say, my lord, Desmond murmured. We go at the bell, Ned said, and they understood. The changing of the watches before dawn, the hour when some are most weary and some most keen. The heat held the city open long into the night. That was an advantage. Sleep loosened hands from hilts, but wakefulness loosened tongues. Let the tongues wag. Nothing moves faster than a whisper in a palace. Varys would already have 6 versions of the plan, some of them too wild to disbelieve, and Littlefinger would have a map where every hallway drew itself toward profit. He would have to move within the noise if he meant to move at all. The hall door opened again, and the smell of roses came with Lord Renly this time despite Loras Tyrell's absence. It was in his clothes or his hair or simply in him. His face was washed, his dark beard trimmed, his green velvet doublet plain for once, the antler brooch at his shoulder ungaudy in the candlelight. His eyes were alight the way men's eyes are when they have chosen, when a weight has left them because they took it up with their own hands. My lord Hand, he said, as if they met in the morning for sweet cakes and not at the edge of a blade. Our friends are placed. Ser Rabar is at the old armory with 3 dozen. I left Ser Parman and Ser Emin in the holdfast yard. The bridge to the Queen's apartments is watched. Loras is escorting the Master of Keys as we speak. There were a few gold cloaks drinking near the buttery. We relieved them of their cups. He grinned. Ned did not return it. He pulled on his gauntlets, flexed his fingers, started to buckle his sword belt 1 notch tighter than habit, then changed his mind and loosed it a hole. Habit had been ground into him by snow and midnight and the hard use of iron. Tonight was no time to change it. You are certain you want the Queen taken alive? It was not quite a question, and not quite an accusation either, though Renly's mouth twitched as if he had tasted it as both. I am not my brother, Renly said, and the realm has had its fill of dead children. Some would say 1 was too many. Ned finished the buckle and let his hands rest on the scabbard's mouth. We hold them as hostages, he said, as much to himself as to the other man. We keep the peace with them. We hold them as the law's surety, Renly returned. Stannis will have them judged when he comes. Meanwhile they live. And meanwhile Tywin Lannister sends men in red to cut them out like a rotten tooth. Tom muttered, too low for anyone to scold him. Renly heard it anyway. Let him try the holdfast, he said softly. My uncle taught me the story of Maegor. Those walls were built to shut out dragons. Ned thought that walls were only as strong as the men who believed in them. He thought of the queens he had never met whose bodies had been bricked up beneath some of those same stones, and of the passages only Varys knew, and of doors a child could slip through. He had ordered guards at every arch and gate and flight of stairs. Still he knew the truth of fortresses. Winterfell had been a fortress, and the snow had gone where it pleased. Go, he said, Take your men to the far side of the bridge. I'll come by the steps behind the Great Hall. If anything goes wrong, you fall back on the godswood and hold it." Renly put a hand briefly over his antlers as if to hold them steady. "My friend," he said, and for a moment his face was open in a way that made Ned see the boy he had been in Storm's End's stony shadows, clinging to stubborn defiance through a winter siege while the wind hammered the castle and their bellies muttered. "If this is wrong, it is at least wrong together." Ned gave a short nod. "I have been wrong alone before," he said. They left the Tower of the Hand by a door that most courtiers would have mistaken for a paneling seam. Desmond led, with Tomard behind, and 6 men of Winterfell's household. That was what they called themselves even here. Hullen was among them, his weathered face as patient as old leather, the iron gray of his hair soaked in sweat. He carried a short halberd and moved like a man who had learned to keep horses from biting. The passage smelled of old mortar and of the salt the masons mixed to make the stones hold against the damp. The candles hissed and flared in a draught that found their ankles. At the end of the passage there was a stair that turned tightly. They climbed without speaking, the ring of iron on stone lost in the thick sleep of that hour. The great hall's doors were barred from within by men in Renly's colors. They drew back the bar enough to let Ned through and then dropped it again. Tapestries hung on the walls wavering like kelp. By night they were only shadow upon shadow, antlered stags with eyes like nails. The dais where the king's chair stood was empty. The chair itself, with its carved stags and sharp points, had been draped in dark cloth at Pycelle's direction because it was unlucky to see an empty throne when a king lay dying. Even the licking of the torches seemed to take more care not to be heard. The side door opened to a terrace that overlooked the inner ward. The knight laid a thumb upon the city and held it where it was. The rookery tower an inkstroke against a sky of pitch, the bells still, the windows of the royal apartments dark but for one slender stripe of lamplight where a servant waited upon some urgent appetite. The red keep was a brooding beast around them. Ned stepped out into the warm dark and felt the weight of the stone on his skin like weather. They moved along the terrace quiet as thieves and reached the steps. Men waited in the shadow below, the outline of antlers on a cloak, a sword drawn and held low, a gleam off a rivet. Renly came out of the shadow when Ned's boots touched the lowest stair. He had shed his cloak and most of his smile. Loras took the Master of Keys inside, then doubled back, he murmured, tilting his head toward the low door just visible beneath the arch Pycelle's men fussed. He told them he had left his ring. The old fool sent a page to fetch it while Loras took his clasp off the door. "We have 5 men in already. There are 2 gold cloaks on the bridge." I told them they were relieved. "Will they accept it?" Ned said. Renly's teeth flashed once. "They accepted Loras," he said. "They crossed the yard. The stones here were smooth underfoot." A file of men in green and gold peeled away into the godswood. Its trees were southern things, cypress and myrtle and orange, leaves glossy even beneath the stars, the scent heady with their oils. No heart tree stood here. The gods had no faces in the south, only leaves. Ned looked away. The bridge to the Queen's Tower was slender and high, a rib of stone that made men bow their heads without knowing it. Water ran beneath, not a moat but a narrow stream diverted through the keep so that no one could undermine the foundations. That was a thing the Dragon Kings had understood. The sound of the water was low and persistent. It reminded Ned of nights in the crypts when wolf blood beat dull and patient in his ears. 2 gold cloaks stood in the middle of the bridge, spears upright and helms like half-moons. They turned as the men approached and saw Renly and no one else, because Ned had let his own men hang back. The taller's jaw shifted when he swallowed. "My lord," he said. He was young, no beard, no right to that helm. "You've been relieved," Renly told them quietly, stepping closer until the points of the spears would have touched him if the men had not drawn them back by instinct. "Go down and find Kedge at the buttery. Tell him Lord Renly says he is to post himself at the outer gate." "My lord," the lad began. Renly's hand fell to the spear and slid it gently away from his chest. He leaned in, close enough to fog the boy's visor, and smiled with all his teeth. "Go," he said, in the voice of a man who had commanded Storm's End's kitchens to carve the last onion into 8 and gotten his 8. The boy went. His comrade hesitated half a heartbeat, then followed, tapping the butt of his spear on the stones with more hesitation than manner. Ned let a slow breath leave him. "You should not be the one to speak to them," he said low. "If steel were drawn." Renly flicked a glance at him. "If steel is drawn, it will not matter who speaks before," he replied. "What matters is who speaks after." He gestured toward the door. Within, the corridor was warm as a kiln. A woman's voice drifted thinly from behind one of the tapestries. High and indistinct, nervous laughter. A cup clinked. Servants slept in the niches like handsome carved saints. Loras Tyrell slid out of one such niche like a knife coming free of its sheath. He had abandoned the smile altogether. He had blood on his palm where a ring had bitten him. He did not seem to notice it. "She is in her solar," he whispered. "With her daughter. The little prince is in the nursery with the wet nurse. The hound is not with them. I saw Ser Mandon Moore and Ser Boros Blunt playing Sivas near the stair. They did not like my face." He smiled for a heartbeat then, thin as paper, and it vanished. "I left Ser Emin and 4 at the landing. The Master of Keys is in the pantry with Parman and a sack over his head." "We go," Ned said, because the moment had come up beneath him like a platform and either you stood on it or you fell. The first door after the Solar's antechamber stood open a finger's breadth. A breeze moved the silk like slow water. A maid's shoe lay on its side on the tiles, small as a child's toy. Ned caught Loras's wrist and nodded toward the corridor's bend. Loras raised 2 fingers and flicked them once. A man went silently to the corner and stood there with his shield up so it became part of the wall. They reached the Solar. The door was closed. Tomard put his meaty hands on the latch, and Desmond set the point of his sword under the tongue of the hasp. The metal made a tiny sound, like a note on a harp. Loras tilted his head. From within came the faint rustle of skirts, a murmur. There was no laughter. Ned's heartbeat felt like that underground stream, persistent and low. He took hold of the door's edge with his scarred fingers and pushed it open. The room was a pool of lamplight set in dark. Lemon trees stood in pots along the wall with an open balcony beyond, and a breeze wandered in with the scent of crushed leaf. On a low couch, Marcella Baratheon lay with her head in her mother's lap. The child had fallen asleep with a book on her stomach, both hands still placed upon it as if holding it in the act of passing forward. The queen's fingers rested in her daughter's hair. Cersei Lannister looked up when the door opened. For a heartbeat her face was only a woman's face, tired and unguarded, an expression that moved across it like a ripple and was gone at once. Then her mouth altered and there was iron in it. "Lord Stark," she said. "How fortunate. I was about to send for you." Renly stepped in on Ned's right and Loras on his left, and Tomard and Desmond and the rest into the spaces behind so that the room's shadow became live with men. The queen did not stand. She did not move her hand from her daughter's hair. "Your Grace," Ned said, because titles mattered even when they were knives. "What is the meaning of this?" Ser Mandon Moore's voice came from behind the screen. He stepped into view with his face like a block of chalk, eyes sleepy and dangerous. He wore no helm, his white and soot half unlaced, though the sword on his hip was belted tight. Ser Boros Blunt shouldered in beside him, his jaw gray with stubble and his eyelids puffy. A small man in a brown robe with a basin of herbs in his hands peered around their elbows, the Queen's Maester's boy. He took one look at the men and went a shade paler than his robe. Ned did not take his eyes from the Queen, and he did not move his hand toward his sword. "By the King's command," he said, and saw the way the Queen's eyes flickered, a candle in a draught. "And by the office he has given me, I take you and your children under my protection. You will come with us to Maegor's Holdfast." Cersei's fingers smoothed her daughter's hair and then stilled. "Protection," she repeated. She always tasted words. "From whom?" Her gaze wandered past Renly and found Loras. "Sir Flower," she said, "have you come to teach me to ride?" Loras's face did not change. "To see that you do not fall," he said. And leave you in Magers? She said, as if they discussed holding some ladies' feast day in a drafty hall. That is a cold kindness, Lord Stark. The realm is unsettled, Ned said. It took effort to keep his tongue from saying what it knew, to keep back the words that would spring like fire into the room and turn all the air to ash. He heard his own voice as if it belonged to a man across the hall, patient, grave. The king lies dying. A muscle moved near Cersei's eye. He lies, she said on a breath. He dies only if the gods are cruel. Call your men, Ser Mandon said. The chalk block toned flat, a statement to the other white cloak. Boros Blunt's hand went to the pommel of his sword. Do so, Ned said quietly, and I will read to you the king's letter. He lifted the parchment. The wax seal showed dark as clotted wine. It names me protector of the realm. Your queen and her children are under my protection by law. Attempt to hinder me, and you defy the king's will. You defy the king's blood, Cersei murmured. The lamplight made her hair a hot thing. Whose law is that, Lord Stark? A northern law? Barley law? I do not remember it. The law of inheritance. Renly put in sharply, and when she turned her head to regard him, he showed his teeth with no mirth. The law you know very well. Cersei's gaze slid back to Ned. She studied him a long moment, for no more reason than to watch him hold steady under it. She had a warrior's mind for such things, beneath the queen's jeweled words, a hunter's eye measuring distance. And if I do not come, she said calmly, if I refuse and call for the men who are sworn to me, if I say no and watch you try to take me from this room. Ned saw the room as it would be then. Torn chairs, crushed lemons on the floor, Myrcella's frightened weeping, Desmond's sword bright and wet, Ser Mandon's face unchanged with blood on it, Tomard's hands fumbling to not be rough as he had to be, the cry of a child, Renly's curse, Loras's knee pressed to a throat. He saw 1,000 choices taking shape at once, and only one of them left them all alive. You will come for your daughter's sake, he said, and let the words be iron. You are a mother. For a moment he thought he saw something like pain touch her, and then vanish as if it had been born instead in his own chest. Cersei looked down at the girl whose head lay in her lap and smoothed the hair once more. Myrcella stirred and made a small sound, half words, half breath. Myrcella, the queen said softly, with no play in it. Wake and do as I say. The girl's eyes opened. She looked up at her mother's face and then sideways to see the men who filled the room. There was a child's fear in her face that made her look like Tommen for an instant. She did not scream. She blinked again and put both hands on the book. What must I do, mother? Her voice was small, but it had control in it. You must come, Cersei said, and hold your head high. She did not look at Ned while she said it. She did not ask where. She did not ask why. Renly gestured, and men moved, 2 to Myrcella's side, 1 to the balcony to bar it, 1 to the little inner door that led to the queen's bedchamber. The maester's boy with the basin shrank against the wall. Loras took the basin and set it neatly on a table, placed the lad's hands upon it, and murmured, If you spill it, I will have your hands tied to the wall. He smiled to soften it and failed. The boy's gaze fixed on the herbs as if they were a map of the world's only safe country. Where is the prince? Ned asked. In the nursery, Cersei said. She turned her head then and let her eyes touch his, slow and deliberate. Sandor will take you to him. The hound is with the boy? Renly was surprised. Cersei's mouth smiled without her eyes. Some men sleep with their swords, she said. Sandor Clegane sleeps with his duty. They found him as stated, seated on a bench beneath a narrow lancet that let in a smear of false breeze and a smell of old cloth. He had his back to the stone and his long legs stretched out. His helm sat on the floor beside his foot, the snarling dog leering up at the ceiling. One elbow rested on the bench, the black cloak puddled about him, and his big burned face had the look of a man passing time he does not despise. A boy's soft snoring came from a cradle pushed almost to the wall. A nurse sat on a stool with her eyes closed and her hands knit on her belly, a wrapped package of woman. She half stirred when she felt the air change. Sandor lifted his head and saw them come in. He did not reach for the helm. His eyes moved over the men and fixed on Ned with a thoughtful contempt that never quite hardened into hatred. "Lord Stark," he said. He had a way of speaking names like he had put a knife down upon the table and wanted to see who would pick it up by the wrong end. "If you have come to cut the boy's throat, you should take him yourself. He bites." "No blood," Renly said through his teeth, low and furious. Ned raised a hand to quiet him without looking away from the hound. "I have come to take the prince with me," he said. "By the king's command. For his safety." "That right?" Sandor asked. "The king commanded it? When it needed commanding," Renly snapped. Sandor's eyes flicked to him and away. He seemed briefly amused. "What safe is there in this city?" He asked no one in particular. "I have yet to find the street where a boy can walk and not step on a rat." He swung his legs under him and rose. He was a long man and graceful in a way that came from knowing exactly what parts of his body people tended to look at and using the ones they did not. "If you want the whelp, he's yours. Am I to come too?" He spread his hands, long fingers splayed. "That would be wise," Ned said. "For his sake. For mine?" Sandor's mouth did something that was not smiling. "It won't be wise for the man who tries to touch him, Stark." They woke Tommen as if he were a glass cup. He opened his eyes and saw men and tried not to cry, which only made the sound catch in his throat and climb higher. The nurse murmured nonsense in a voice like milk. Sandor picked the boy up with an unexpected care that made his big black-gloved hands look almost delicate. Tommen, half asleep still, put his face against the man's chest, where the male would scrape if he were awake enough to notice. "Joffrey," Cersei said when they brought Tommen and Myrcella to the Queen's solar again. "Where is Joffrey?" She had not asked until then. It had been deliberate restraint, and Ned felt that he owed something to the quality of it, whether or not it had been true strength or just a sense not to show weakness. "In his chambers?" Renly said. "We'll go there next." "No," Cersei told him pleasantly. "He's in the yard teaching the cats to bow." "That would be a sight," Loras murmured. "He is with Ser Meryn," the Queen said. "In the yard. He does not sleep like his brother." She rose then, slowly, so as not to jar the daughter whose hair her hand still touched. "I will come, Lord Stark," she said. "You may escort me to Maegor's." Ned bowed his head a fraction, equal parts respect and wariness. "As you say, Your Grace." They crossed the bridge with Myrcella between them and Tommen in Sandor Clegane's arms. The stream's sound filled the hollow places of the moment, so that even Desmond's footfalls seemed to happen in water. On the far side, Renly's men fanned, shields up, helms low, the way a pond's surface changes when a stone is thrown in. Ned felt a tightness in his shoulders that did not leave even as they reached the foot of the stair that fell to the yard between the Queen's Tower and the Great Well. They saw Joffrey before he saw them. The prince stood with his back to a pillar, a practiced sword in his hand, too slender and too pretty to ever look dangerous. Meryn Trant was with him, paunch wrapped in white, his arms up to show the boy the stroke. Joffrey's hair caught the torchlight and showed like beaten metal. His mouth, that weak-lipped Lannister mouth that he thought made him a Baratheon king, pursed. He swung and hit the practice pell with a rap that would hardly split an apple. "Harder," Meryn murmured, almost bored. "Your GR." He stopped because he had seen them. His little frog eyes darted and jumped. Joffrey turned then, too quick, overly theatrical, and saw his mother, and his face changed as a pond's surface changes when a gust comes across it. He did not move toward her. He lifted his chin and made his mouth mean. "What is this?" He had his father's height coming but not grown into it yet. His voice reached for depth and did not find it. "You, Lord Stark, what do you think you are doing?" He pointed with the practiced sword, the gesture childish and terrible in its presumption. "Protecting you," Ned said. He did not slow, did not tighten his grip on the parchment. "You will come to Maegor's Holdfast with your mother and your brother and sister, for your safety, until the king recovers." "The king," Joffrey began, thick with arrogance, and then something in the way Ned's mouth flattened. Enough of Robert lived in Ned's bearing that the boy wavered. It made no difference. He drew himself up again in that peacock way. "I do not take orders from you," he said, and turned to Meryn.
Ser Meryn.
"Seize them." Meryn Trant looked at Cersei. She stared at him with an expression that was almost gentle and told him nothing. Meryn Trant looked at Sandor Clegane, who gazed back at him like a man contemplating a fly. Meryn Trant looked at Renly's men, at their number and their position, and at the way the queen stood with Myrcella's hand in hers and said nothing, and his hand moved toward his sword hilt and then away again as if the hilt were a pan of bread too hot to grasp. "Your Highness," he said in a voice that could not bear the weight of anything. "It would be prudent to obey," Renly said brightly, and someone behind him laughed, not viciously, not kindly either. Joffrey opened his mouth to command and snapped it shut when Cersei spoke his name. "Joffrey," she said. She put nothing else in the word. The boy hesitated, and for 3 heartbeats the Yard stared at him while he stared at his mother. Those heartbeats were enough to weld the moment into shape. He flung his practiced sword down. It clattered on the stones with a sound that no man with a soldier's soul could like. "You will pay for this," he said to Ned, small and venomous. "When I am king, I will." "You are a boy," Ned said, not unkindly, "and you will come." They came in a knot through the yard and threaded the corridors like thread through a narrow needle's eye. Men stood back. Men who would have drawn steel if there had been a little more dark or a little less. Men who would have chosen if they could have done so without choosing. A court lives by seeing which way the servants run, and the servants ran before them, sat, stood, curtsied, and said nothing with their faces. Tommen yawned against Sandor's black mail. Myrcella held her head high and did not cry. Joffrey hissed threats and promises and curses in a thin rain, like the spatter from a pot that has boiled over and makes a mess without scalding anyone. Cersei moved like a swimmer keeping her hair dry in shallow water. Maegor's holdfast swallowed them. It was not so much another building as a compact idea of safety made real, with a gatehouse like a jaw and a bridge with teeth. Men closed the gates behind them and the bars fell and the sound was final. It sounded like a thing beyond any of their wills. 100 times in 100 years the sound had closed around someone and said, "You are not going out until the world beyond changes." Ned felt it like old snow around his boots. They were given apartments on the 2nd level. Heavy oak doors, windows too narrow to pass a child. The balconies screened not for modesty but to catch any rope. Renly had placed men in the chambers adjoining and across the hall. Lord Parman preferred the stair. Loras chose the passage by the servants' door. Tomard and Desmond took positions like the ends of a bowstring. Ned kept the parchment in his hand until he saw the queen and her children physically within the rooms. Then he rolled the letter without looking at it and tucked it into his belt. Cersei turned and faced him. Surrounded as she was, she seemed larger, not smaller. "You are not a southern man," she said, with something like curiosity, as if she had discovered a bird in her garden no one had told her lived anywhere but ice. "I had thought you would squeam and sigh and be sick into a basin at the notion of carrying off children in the night. I have carried my children in my arms across snow that would eat their toes if I slipped," Ned said. He heard his own voice and did not recognize it, deeper, like a thing drawn from a well. "I will not draw a blade on yours." Her eyes were green glass and could become anything they reflected. "No," she said lightly, "give the command and you will not have to. Men like to do such things for lords. It makes them feel important." She looked over his shoulder at Renly. "Brother-in-law," she said, and let the contempt fall like the corner of a napkin dropping after the last course. "Have you so little to do at night? Shouldn't you be in a better bed?" Renly's mouth went hard. Pleased her. He opened his mouth and Ned, without turning, said, "Leave it." He did not need to see Renly's face to know the look it wore. "We will keep a septa with your daughter," Ned went on, "and a maester if you desire one. Your guards will attend you at table and in the yard, and no farther. The gates are closed." Cersei lifted her chin, then dropped it half an inch and smiled. "Have you never learned?" she said. That there are doors that are not gates? Varys knows every one of them, Renly muttered, then regretted saying as much in front of her. Yes, Cersei agreed pleasantly. Varys knows everything. He even knows where your secrets are not. She looked back at Ned. Shall we sup, Lord Stark? Or are you content to pen your queen like a broodmare and let hunger eat her tail? You will eat, Ned said, and drink, and sleep. He were aware of Sandor Clegane in the doorway, a black presence, the dog head under his arm like a tamed monster cradled. Sandor will stay with Tommen, he added without giving himself time to consider if the Queen's man was the right man. Cersei's eyes shifted in approval ever so slightly. If Sandor turned, it would be in the open, and Ned preferred open dangers to hidden ones. Myrcella stepped forward then. The girl had been very quiet through all of it, allowing words to pass over her like warmth and coolness. She put her hand to her mother's sleeve and tugged once. "May I write to Princess Arianne?" she asked suddenly, startling them all. "She is to send me a pin made like a seahorse when it is done. I am to send her lace." Cersei closed her eyes a moment, and when she opened them again, there was something raw in them that was not hate. "You may write," she said. "Sire." She looked to Loras and then to Ned as if to say, "Choose me a jailer to carry my child's letter." "The spider may carry it," she finished, with a little twist of the mouth that made mock of all their precautions. "Varys will not be admitted," Ned said. "Not without my leave." He turned to Renly. "Send for a septa, and tell Pycelle I will see him at first light in the council chamber." Renly inclined his head. "I will do it," he said. He had wanted to be the blade. He would be the voice instead, and he did not like the taste of that change in his mouth. He went out and took his men with him. When the door had closed and the hinges sung their last note, Cersei and Ned looked at one another and everything fell very quiet. Tommen yawned again and rubbed his eyes with the heel of his hand. Myrcella's fingers went to her mother's hand and plucked at it in a child's quick, nervous rhythm. Joffrey sulked with such intensity that it seemed an act of piety, furious and pure and useless. "We could have been friends," Cersei observed, as if it were a matter for a singer's lay. "If you had been a different man, and I a different woman." "Perhaps," Ned said. He knew it was not true, and she knew he knew, and that was another thing between them. He left them then, because he would not allow himself to be stared down by green glass, and because there was so much to bind and so little of him to do the binding. The stair went down in tight turns. He put his hand on the stone when his foot missed and found it steady. The air in the passage was cooler. The guards at the bridge straightened as he passed. He counted his breath. He thought of Winterfell before he let himself think of Sansa and Arya. In the gods' wood there, the heart tree listened with a face. He had sometimes believed, as a boy, that if he told a problem to the carved mouth, it would be taken from him by those red leaves. There were no such leaves here, only shapes. Behind the door of the room he had taken for himself in Maegor's lower level, Arya Stark sat cross-legged on a bench with a wooden sword across her knees and a look of watchfulness that was older than she was. Her hair stuck out like a black hedge around her face. Syrio Farrell leaned in the embrasure without touching it, balanced casual and insolent, as if he were challenging the opening to widen or grow shy. He looked pleased with himself in the way a man does when he has told the truth and enjoyed it. Sansa stood by the table with a handkerchief in her fist, eyes red and face pale, and the thing that made Ned's chest ache most was not the tears, but that she had tried not to show them and failed. "Father," she said, breathy with relief and accusation both. "What is happening?" Someone said. Ned put his hands on her shoulders and they were thin through the linen. "The king is very ill," he told them. He looked at Syrio and saw respect in the man's eyes that a proud bravo seldom gave. "We have done what we must do to keep the peace. Is Joffrey safe?" Sansa asked at once, and there it was, the sting he knew he had earned. He did not flinch. "He is with his mother and brother and sister in the holdfast," Ned said. "With guards. No harm will come to him." Sansa's face loosened with relief at that first and then tightened again with uncertainty. He will be angry if he is kept from me? She said softly, as if that were the worst thing. Perhaps for her it was. He will not understand. Arya's mouth moved. He will stamp and pout, she said, careless. Like a girl. Sansa's head snapped toward her. You take that back. Arya, Ned said. He did not put anger into it. She reddened and subsided, but her eyes kept moving. The way eyes do when a fight menaces the edge of a street and you cannot be certain it will not come to you whether or not you go to it. We will stay in these rooms until I tell you otherwise, he said. You will not go into the yard. You will not speak to anyone who is not a man of mine. Not even, he hesitated. He had never been a man to forbid when a command would do, but this was a night for forbidding. Not even the Hound, he finished, or Littlefinger, or Varys. If they come, you tell Tomard or Desmond and they will send for me. Peter is your friend, Sansa said. It was not defiance but confusion. The world had always told her the story of Peter Baelish as a charming tale with clever jokes. He is no friend to you, Ned said. He would not say he is no friend to me because Peter, like Varys, like Pycelle, was a friend to himself in a country where that often meant survival. There are men who will smile and set sweet things before you and mean you harm. If you have a doubt, do nothing and fetch Tomard. Syrio Farrell lifted his chin. The girl with the stick, he said, will not be taken by any man who does not understand that his feet are too heavy for the dance. He looked at Arya. You will practice. He tilted his head toward Sansa without cruelty. And you will learn to listen. Even songbirds learn the wind. Sansa clutched the handkerchief more tightly. She did not like Syrio. She had never liked him, and he had never made any more attempt to please her than a stream makes to flatter a stone. I am listening, she whispered. She looked at her father again, and her mouth trembled. Are we prisoners? Ned took a breath. We are the ones with the keys, he said, which was true and yet did not ring as comfort in the room. Go to sleep. There will be much to do tomorrow. There will be much to do tonight, Syrio murmured, but it was to Arya, who flashed a quick, fierce grin even as she obeyed and slid down from the bench, cradling the sword like bread. When they were alone, Tomard at the door and the night pressed up against the windows with its heavy weight. Ned allowed himself a slow easing of the shoulders that left him more exhausted than before. He sat. His bad leg throbbed with the hours. There were days now when he thought of it as a separate creature that merely came along for the journey out of pity. He pressed fingers against the ache above the knee and found it tender as a bruise, as if it might bloom purple in the morning if he lifted the cloth. The little table between the chairs held bread and a piece of cheese that had sweated free of itself. He cut and chewed mechanically and tasted nothing. A soft sliding sigh of silk announced Varys before Varys made a sound. That was the man's art, to be heard without being heard, to be seen without being looked at. He stood just inside the door, hands folded, the sleeves of his lavender robe falling in gentle drifts to either side. His round face a careful canvas painted with concern. My lord Hand, he breathed. What a night you have made. Go away, Tomard said, and had taken 2 steps toward him with every intention of lifting him bodily and placing him outside when Ned held up a hand. No, Tom, Ned said. Let him speak. Varys bowed. His eyelids fluttered with relief as false as cheap coin. I am full of admiration, he cooed, and Ned did not ask whose admiration he carried. Like a pot of soup from a kitchen he did not name. So decisive, so decided. If only the king had shown such strength when it was needed in years past. But then, he sighed. Our Robert ever had a gentle heart where he ought not. Say what you came to say, Ned said, and do not use more words than you must. Varys's lips pursed. It was not flattering to be denied one's flourishes. You have seized the queen and the royal children, he said. You have placed them in Maegor's holdfast and set your own guard. You have, how shall I put it, discomposed the city watch. Janos Slynt is neither where he might be nor where he should be. Lord Renly has made the kitchens his nest and feeds his knights from their stores. The small council is a dish of eels. Is there a point among the eels? Renly asked from the doorway, He had come back silent as a cat, with Loras a step behind. Varys made a delicately pained face and spread his hands. "Only that the bells will soon toll," he said. "And then the true music begins." Ned set his jaw. "We will hear them," he said. "The council will meet at dawn. Pycelle will bring his chains and tell us stories about Ares and justice. Littlefinger will smile and count. You will ask to see the queen. I will say no. And we will all be very civil." Varys's eyes shone. "You do me wrong," he murmured. "I will not ask to see her. I will wait until you cannot do without my knowing how she sees you." He turned his hands so the sleeves fell back, exposing pale wrists. "You have done a bold thing. Now you must do a harder thing." "Which is?" Renly cut in, impatient. "Keep the peace," Varys said softly. "You have wrapped the realm in an oiled cloth to carry it down a stair without dropping it. Every man who thinks himself a ladder will throw his shoulder against you. You must not let it slip. That requires," he paused, "coin." His smile was apologetic and sincere and false and true, all in one unlovely parcel. Renly stiffened. "I will pay the watch 3 times their wage," he snapped. "I will pour Highgarden's wine into their throats until they drown in gratitude." Varys wagged a finger as if caressing air. "Wage buys a day," he murmured. "Gratitude buys an hour and a story to tell later. Fear buys a week. Nothing buys a year." "Then what buys a year?" Ned asked, not because he did not know but because he wished to hear the man say it. "Legitimacy," Varys answered, "and let the word have a weight. You have called law to witness. Now call those who make law seem real to men. Summon lords. Summon septons. Summon people who wear their hats tall. Let them see that what has been done was done in the open. Let them sit in the hall and sweat, and give them bread, and read to them your king's letter, and do not hide your wolves. Send for Lord Stannis." He said the last so softly that Renly's face showed a flinch only because he had been waiting not to. "I have sent," Ned said. "The raven flew before midnight." "Good," Varys purred. He laid 2 fingers together. "Then send for the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard." "Selmy is with the king," Renly said. "Send for him," Varys repeated. "Men will believe in law if Barristan Selmy bows to it." He tilted his head. "And someone should see the king." Ned had not let himself think the word dead, but it lay between them now, a fish they had all stepped around without speaking. He rose. "I will go," he said. He looked at Tomard. "You will not let anyone enter the queen's rooms." Tomard nodded. Renly shifted. "I will come with you," he said, not in a way that asked permission. Loras said nothing, but the curve of his shoulder changed. They took the long way through the holdfast yard and across the bridge again, past the godswood that smelted its sweet oils into the night until Ned wanted to rub his tongue against his teeth. The inner ward had begun to stir. The kitchen's back door stood open. Servants' voices murmured like bees. The sky above the city's eastern wall was going a shade lighter, as if some great painter had brushed a thin wash over the black. From the direction of Flea Bottom came the first echo of a call to bread. The bells had not yet tolled. That silence stretched. The king lay in his bed like a felled oak, hewn and banded, ready for moving. He had been a mountain of a man for so long that even broken he dominated the bed. The sheets had been changed, but wine stained the linen by his mouth and beneath his beard. His eyes were closed. His chest rose and fell shallowly. When Ned stepped near, Barristan Selmy rose from a stool and the old man's armor whispered like cloth. He had no helm, and his hair, white as hammered tin, lay in cowlicks across his brow damp with the heat. Pycelle sat on a camp chair with his chain looped across his chest like a net cast carelessly upon him by a lazy fisherman. He was nodding when Ned entered, and woke with a twitch. "My lord Hand," he said, plucking at his beard to make himself look less asleep. "The king sleeps. It is best." "How long?" Ned asked Selmy, because Barristan knew what needed to be measured and Pycelle knew how to make any measure sound like his own insight. "A little," Selmy said. His face wore the tiredness of a man who has sat long at night and did not have to. He woke and asked for wine. He cursed and then he laughed. He sang 3 lines of a song I did not know, about a girl with tassels on her bodice. Then he slept again. Did he ask for me? Selmy's eyes moved to him and away. He said your name, he answered, and said protector. I cannot be sure he knew he said it. Pycelle puffed his cheeks. The leeching has done its work, he muttered. The boar's tusk was so much deeper than it seemed. His grace's humors are. He closed his lips when he saw Renly, and some of the bronze in his face melted into brass. Lord Renly, he added belatedly. Renly looked at his brother like a man who had carved a likeness and found it looked like someone else. He turned his head away first. Has he spoken a will? He asked. A letter was written, Barristan said. Lord Stark has it. He did not ask why the letter had not been written in the council's presence. That was one of Barristan's virtues. He could choose not to see and yet see. He named Lord Stark Protector of the Realm, Pycelle observed mildly, as if discussing the medicinal value of lemon. Strictly speaking, such an office, if one interprets Aegon V aright, is meant to be held by the hand only until the coming of the rightful king. He coughed. Stannis, Renly said flatly. Pycelle lowered his eyes. Ned stepped closer to the bed and looked at Robert one last time while he could still pretend it mattered that he did. The man had been his friend, had had laughter that shook boards and broke bread into crumbs with the force of it. He had made mistakes and covered them with drink and bravado and women, and the boy inside him had never learned to come out when he should. He had also loved in his rough way, and killed for love, and burned the realm with it. He thought of a deer on a winter hillside in the north, its breath smoking, standing long enough for the arrow to find it because it had thought it stronger than hunger. He put a hand on the bedpost. The wood had been polished by 100 hands, and felt warm. He left it warm. The queen and the royal children are secure, Ned said to Barristan Selmy, because it was that man's business to hear it. I will call the council at dawn. Barristan inclined his head, as if a weight he had been holding had been shifted slightly, away from one tendon to another. As you command, Lord Protector, he said. He did not smile as he said it. He did not frown. He simply took the words and put them where he had to put them to go on. The bells began then, one voice and then 3 and then all the mouths of the city, calling and calling, the notes carrying up the hill and into the king's bedchamber, into the passage where Loras started, into the yard where men jerked their heads up like hounds hearing a horn. Even asleep, the city knew its own toll. Some rose and crossed themselves. Some spat. Some paused in their thieving. Ned felt the sound in his bones and even in his bad leg. It filled the gaps in him. Robert Baratheon died to bells, and the sound made the air thick. Varys had been right. Now the true music began. In the council chamber, the air was already boiling. Littlefinger was there when they arrived, perched in a chair as if on a lover's knee, fingers steepled, eyes half-lidded. Pycelle waddled in behind them like a goose driven from a garden. Varys poured himself around the door jamb and collected himself at the table's edge with his hands folded and his mouth small. Renly took his place to Ned's right. The chair that should have been Stannis's remained empty and said nothing. Barristan came last, after sending a boy to stand at the king's door, and took his place separate from the table, as if the Kingsguard's whiteness required its own furniture. Ned placed the letter upon the table. He did not sit until he had done it. He saw Littlefinger's eyes go to the wax and then to Ned's face, weighing, calculating the coin of that face. His grace is dead, Ned said. He did not want to say Robert. He did not want to say has died. He placed the words where they belonged. He unrolled the letter and put it where they could read it. These are his last orders. Pycelle's eyes misted with well-practiced grief. Oh, my sweet friends, he murmured. What a tragedy, our noble king. So. He dabbed a tear that might have been old sweat. Spare us, Renly said. Read. Pycelle peered, squinting, then took a chain in his fingers and held it up as if light might fall from it. Protector of the realm, he read. mouth shaping the syllables as if to taste their flavor. Until the... He hesitated, then plowed on. Until the heir can take his rightful place. Littlefinger's smile made the room seem smaller. And who is the heir? He said, as mild as milk. Stannis Baratheon, Ned said, before anyone else could let the heir grow thick with the wrong name. By all the laws of the realm, born of Lord Steffan and Lady Cassana, brother to the late king, the next in the line of succession. Joffrey is the king's son, Pycelle murmured. Ned's throat worked. It would be so easy to let the truth out now, to break it in the middle of the room and watch men slip in it. We will have a coronation, he said instead, when the rightful king arrives. Until then, by the late king's command, I will serve. Varys closed his eyes as if in gratification. So well put, he breathed. So measured. Renly spread his hands. We have the queen and her chicks in Maegor's holdfast, he said, as if discussing hens. What remains? Everything, Littlefinger said, and smiled wider when Renly glared. Your men in the yard are very fine. The gold cloaks, however, must have their orders from the Lord Commander, who seems to have misplaced himself, and the city must be told that it still has a head. The High Septon must be invited to sing in the proper hall. The lords in the city must be led to see that they came to court and not to a cockfight. He picked up the letter, turned it, and laid it down again. And you must decide if you will speak the whole truth today, Lord Stark, or let it trickle out by tomorrow, and on the morrow find everyone ankle-deep in it. There are truths that break the world and truths that steady it, Ned said. This is no feast day. We do what we can to keep bread in mouths and swords in scabbards. That is all. And how long will bread and scabbards hold the Lannisters? Littlefinger asked, and if there was a tremble in his voice, it was not fear. He enjoyed trembling the way other men enjoyed wine. Your hostages are costly guests, my lord. Tywin Lannister never paid for anything he could take. And there is a force at Harrenhal that does not love you, yes. Renly leaned forward. Tywin does not love anyone, he said. He cares for his name. A man does not like to see his blood in another man's pen. Varys's fingertips touched one another and drew apart like actors in a farce. All the more reason, he murmured, to make a show of piety. If the High Septon blesses the late king's letter in the Great September, and if you take the oaths of those lords present to uphold it, and if Ser Barristan, oh, such an important if Ser Barristan attends you, then Tywin must be seen to move against it, not merely around it. He can do much. He cannot do that openly without cost. Selmy's face neither softened nor hardened. I will serve the king, he said, in the voice men use when they are tired of being asked whom they serve. You will escort the protector, Renly said smoothly, before Littlefinger could smile again. In white, through the city, to the September, and there you will stand. Meanwhile, Varys murmured, we must be certain that no door in Maegor's holdfast decides to open of its own accord. Birds find their way through the strangest places. He drooped an eyelid toward Ned, laden with innuendo. You see why I do not ask to visit the queen. My presence would be merely ornamental, and your men are pretty enough already. Renly rose so quickly his chair scraped. I will see to the watch, he said. If Janos Slynt has mislaid himself in Littlefinger's cellar, I will have him found in a basket. We will see how much he will sell his soul for. He looked to Ned. Highgarden has purses. You will buy time with them, Ned said. We only need time, Renly replied. For Stannis. He said the name with the kind of resignation that made Varys's mouth compress in a tiny dot that might have been mirth. They moved like that until the light came in beneath the shutters, not like a wash but like a knife, cutting white shapes on the council table's edge. In the holdfast, Cersei watched the pale spread and calculated. In their chamber, Arya slept with the wooden sword across her knees and Sansa curled upon her side with the handkerchief still gripped between her fingers. In the yard, Loras Tyrell stretched his neck and rolled his shoulders and smiled a little at the men who glowered, because he liked a hall that looked at him the way a woman might. The smell of bread from the city below grew stronger. The bells ceased. Silence came down afterwards like a cloth to lay upon the dead. Ned rose. His leg complained. He ignored it. "Barristan," he said. "With me." "Your Grace," Littlefinger murmured, with light mockery he could deny later. "Shall I fetch the High Septon or merely send him a pigeon?" Ned did not rise to the bait. Renly touched Loras's shoulder with his fingers on their way out, the gesture quick and private and full of the things that would undo him if he let them be seen. Varys's eyes followed that small movement and hid the knowledge it offered him like a sweet tucked in a sleeve. On the steps down to the yard, the morning struck them full in the face. The red keep bled its heat into the day as if reluctant to let it take the night away. The gold cloaks were even more numerous than before. Men who had been invisible at midnight were visible now, like spores that the dark had nourished. Some had clean-shaven faces and hair combed with care. Others had the look of men who had gambled and lost and were prepared to fight over the truth of it. Renly spoke to them with his voice pitched to carry. "The Lord Protector goes to the Great September," he announced. "The city watch will clear the streets. No man will draw steel unless there is steel drawn upon him first." He picked one of the gold cloaks out with his gaze. A lank man with a scar through his lip. Your name?" "Kedge Emlord," the man said. He was the same they had sent the night before to the buttery. Renly smiled. "You will walk at the Protector's left. You have an honest mouth, Kedge. Use it." In the doorway to Maegor's Holdfast, Cersei stood with Myrcella beside her and Tommen's hand in hers. Joffrey had not been allowed to come. His shouted anger still filled the rooms like steam. Cersei's dress was white and green, her hair a shining coil. She looked like spring, and there was winter behind her eyes. Ned paused because to pass her without speaking would be to give her a small victory, and he was counting such small things already like coins. He inclined his head a fraction. "Your Grace," he said, "we go to the September. The city will hear the king's last command." She considered him and chose not to say what she was thinking. "Pray loudly," she told him. "Many men do not hear unless the gods shout." "Some do not hear even then," he answered. "They have their own gods." Her lips quirked. "And some men are their own gods," she said. "Go, Lord Stark. Be seen. It is half your strength." She glanced past him to Renly and Loras. "Yours is the other half." He went out between lines of men in green and men in gold and men in gray with a white knight at his side whose armor whispered, and the doors of the red keep exhaled behind them like a creature that wished it could draw them back in. The city spread before him and below him, roofs and lanes and ladders and prayers, and beyond all of it the glittering mouth of Blackwater Bay opening to ships. The air smelled of bread and tar and sweat and hope. The streets had been swept in the night by women who knew this day would bring dust and more besides. They saw him and drew back and pressed palms together. They stared. The watchmen shouted and made corridors of silence. Ned walked as a man walks when he is being measured. He did not think of what would come next. He thought of placing one foot and then the other on the stones and of letting his shoulder find the rhythm that would take the weight off his leg and appear to carry some other weight only men who had carried it could see. At his left, the gold cloak, Kedge, walked with eyes keen for danger and mouth a little damp with pride. At his right, Barristan Selmy's eyes touched doorways and rooftops and corners. Varys was nowhere to be seen and everywhere to be felt. Littlefinger had gone ahead to fetch hats tall enough to trembling. At Fishmonger's Square, the first of the people in their thousands saw the white cloak and shouted. At Cobbler's Row, women held up children and put hands on their heads as if to push blessings in through the soft places their skulls still had. In the shadow of the great September's white steps, the tallest hats waited with faces composed and hands folded, and a hush spread in a ring outward because men like stillness near power when they can have it. The marble blinded the eyes. The doves on the cornices slept with their heads tucked and woke cooing as the noise lifted and fell. The High Septon, a mountain of flesh and old hair, oiled to gleam and masked with incense and sanctity, came down the steps as Ned approached. He lifted his hands with rings that made his fingers look like candles with drips hardened upon them. "My son," he intoned, a voice like an organ's belly, "the gods are with you." "May they remain," Ned said, and did not kneel. It would have been a pleasing sight for many. He offered the letter instead. The king is dead. This is his last command. Bear witness. The old man's eyes, lost somewhere in the pillows of his face, flicked to the wax and the dire wolf and the seal. He took the parchment and opened it, held it very close to his face to read. Protector of the realm, he said, and the words carried because the steps carried them, because the hats lifted to hear them, because Varys had made sure the wind was right. Until such time as... His voice thinned slightly. Until the rightful successor is crowned. He looked up. Who is that? Stannis Baratheon, Ned said, with Barristan Selmy standing to hear him say it. By the laws of the realm. A murmur ran over the square like a small wave. Ned watched the faces. He saw hunger, cynicism, interest, calculation, dubiety. He saw a man with a mole on his cheek spit and wipe it with the back of his hand as if to seal a private bargain. He saw a woman begin to cry and not know why. He saw a boy on a roof, his legs dangling, not yet sure where his cheer money would come from. He watched the truth sink like a stone into a pond already crowded with stones. The gods see law, the High Septon announced and lifted the letter. We will sing for the king and for his will, and for the peace of the realm, they sang. The voices swelled and piled upon one another until they filled the air. Men who had not sung since their mother's funeral moved their lips. Ned stood with the letter in his belt and the bells now silent and the song loud, with the sun lifting into a day that would be hot and long and difficult, and for a moment he felt something like the north under his feet. Not the snow, not the sweet cold air, but solidity. He stood on stone and men believed in it because it had always been stone. On the steps behind them, Littlefinger stood with his hands folded and his face full of grave pleasure. Varys appeared at his elbow with his mouth small and sympathetic. Renly's jaw clenched when the Septon's voice trembled upon him and steadied and continued. Barristan's hand brushed the hilt of his sword and then moved away. Kedge the Gold Cloak watched the crowd and saw a man with a red sash whisper to a man with a yellow hat and turned his head to find where his lord was so he could tell him if it mattered. He did not find him quickly enough to decide. At Maegor's holdfast, Cersei stood on the balcony behind the screen that did not open to rope and watched the white steps of the Great September in the distance with her eyes narrowed against the glare. Myrcella sat with a quill in hand and her tongue between her teeth, struggling to write seahorse with a flourish. Tommen snored on a couch with a dog at his feet, whose black stare wandered from door to window and back as if all doors and windows were alike to him. Joffrey beat against the doors to the inner hall, demanded his sword, cursed his mother, swore to wed a wolf and put its head on a spike, and in the end sank to the floor with his knees drawn up and his hands clenched and spoke to himself. You have made a neat thing, Cersei murmured, to the air, or to the far shape of the sept that might have heard her anyway because words travel very far when their speaker wishes them to. Let us see if it can stand. Ned let the song end. He lifted a hand and the crowd's noise dropped as if their voices were tied to his fingers by strings. He spoke of law in the plain words that northern men use for fence lines and harvest shares. He spoke of duty and of keeping faith with the dead. He said Stannis's name again with the same firmness. He did not say the thing that would set the square on fire. He was protector. He would be a shield. He would not be a torch. When it was finished, the hats bowed and the hands clapped the way people clap for bread when they are hungry and for beer when they are thirsty. Littlefinger's eyes were full of admiration that had no weight. Varys's eyes were full of understanding that weighed as much as a feather and might do more. Renly leaned close as they turned away. You cannot hold them long, he murmured, a breath in Ned's ear. You must put a crown in front of them. Even mine, if needs be. Ned felt the knife of sunlight on his cheek and did not flinch. Never yours, he said, not unkindly. Not while Stannis draws breath. Renly's smile came and went like a lizard. Then you will need to pray your raven flew straight, he said, and for once there was no malice in it. There was simply the truth that men tell one another when they stand together on stairs too steep to descend without holding hands they do not like to hold. They returned to the keep through streets where the smell of cooking grew fat and promising. Men had left their kitchens unattended to listen and returned to find their pots burning. Children danced upon doorsteps in games that made war into rhyme. A scuffle broke out at the top of the street of Flower, and Kedge waded into it with the calm of a man who knew that 3/4 of any fight was to shout earlier and louder than the next man. They passed a sept where poor men prayed noisily to drown the grief of rich men. Ned's leg ached. He counted the pain's pulses. He felt something else beneath it that could have been hope if a man were foolish enough to call anything hope in King's Landing. In the Tower of the Hand again, the cool of the stone seemed to have retreated to cracks too fine to drink. The paper on the table curled at its edge like a leaf. The seal ring pressed its circle into a little puddle of sweat that had formed under it, a perfect stamp undone by heat. Desmond came to him with a face that put the world into a single word: Slint. Janos Slint stood in the council chamber when Ned walked in, his helmet under his arm, his close-cropped hair soaked and smelling of tallow, his thick-fingered hands clean as if recently washed on purpose to make him look more honest. Littlefinger lounged near him. The master of coin's smile was delicate as spider silk. One guessed it was sticky only by reason. "My lord Hand," Slint said, and bowed too deeply. "The gold cloaks are the king's to command." "And the protectors," Ned said. Slint's smile, when it came, did not reach his eyes. "And the protectors, while there is need." He glanced toward Littlefinger, who raised a hand and let it drift lazily down. Renly came in behind them, smelling of sun and horses. "I told you I would find him in a basket," he said brightly, and Slint's mouth twitched as the city watchman tried to decide whether to be offended. "We must speak of your men, Janos. They will be paid properly for their loyalty. And for their silence?" Littlefinger inquired, almost too low to hear. "For their discretion," Renly corrected, and smiled so hard his teeth almost made noise. Ned watched Peter Baelish's face the way one watches a playing cat. Amused despite oneself, wary because the claws are so close to the thing one loves. "You will not visit the Queen," he said to Slint. "You will hold the gates. You will order your men to keep the peace. Anyone who draws steel without my leave will be punished, no matter whose man he is." Slint tapped the helmet against his thigh. "As you say, my lord. And when will the boy be king?" "When the rightful king is crowned," Ned said, and the way he did not say Stannis told Slint everything he needed to know about what to sell and to whom. Slint smiled then. He said, "I will keep the peace." He turned the helmet in his hands once, twice. "Peace is a dear thing. Dear, but cheap to break," Littlefinger murmured. "Do not worry, my lord. I shall find coin to put to your peace. I can make bread from air when my friends are generous." His eyes flickered to Renly. "And they always are." Ned had the sense then of standing on a deck with the sea just beginning to run and the first movement of a swell waking under his feet. The ship would either crest it with habit or take water over the rail. He set his hand upon the table. It was only wood. It steadied him anyway. He took the hours that followed and laid them side by side. Men posted, doors barred, bread ordered for the guards, a septa fetched for Myrcella, a new nurse for Tommen who had not known a Lannister in her life, 5 ravens dispatched, their legs bound with letters that smelled of wax and salt. Barristan sat at his side for the remainder of the day like a white gravity. Arya sent to the kitchens with Syrio to fetch their dinner because she would otherwise eat her practiced sword. Sansa coaxed to drink a cup of watered wine and sit by the window where a breeze could find her. Each act was small and common. Each had the taste of something brittle within it, a sugar crust that would crack when you laid a knife to it whether you meant to or not. At dusk, when the city's metal cooled and the cries of the gulls turned raucous, Ned found himself at a window that overlooked the Blackwater. The river's skin held the sky's last color like a bruise. Ships lay at anchor beyond the mudflats, their masts a black forest. The wind brought the smell of sea and char and a faint sweetness from the lemon trees in the Queen's rooms which the Holdfast's narrow court carried like a rumor. The door behind him creaked. He did not turn. He knew it was Cersei before she told him so. Some people carry knowledge of themselves in the air around them and demand your senses before they speak. "My Lord Stark," she said. Will you look at me when I talk to you, or is that a northern fashion? To show a back instead of a face? He looked. Her gown was dusk blue and made her skin look like milk at night. She had left her hair unbound so that it fell like a net to her waist. She had no jewels on her neck and did not need them. Her throat was pale and strong enough. "How did you come?" he asked. It did not matter. The question acknowledged the fact of her being there. Questions are a way men leave a door open without inviting, and she knew as much and stepped through it lightly. "Through a door," she said. "One of yours. Your men are good at guarding what they know. They are not good at imagining what they do not." She came forward without hurry and stood near him, far enough that he could step away if he needed to and close enough that stepping away would yield her a small victory she did not intend to take yet. "They are loyal," she went on, and her voice had curiosity in it again, almost genuine. "Is it love of you that makes them so, or fear?" "Love," Ned said, because in the north those words had weight, and because fear, though useful, makes for brittle bonds. "And because I have loved them back." A corner of her mouth lifted. "I have found that it is more efficient to be feared," she said. "It saves time. It wastes souls," Ned returned. She shrugged, and the motion made her hair whisper against her back. "Souls," she said, as if tasting a word men used to excuse themselves for their cowardice. "Very well. So we have your love pitted against my efficiency. We will see which breaks first." He looked back to the water. "Why did you come?" He did not dress it in courtesy this time. "To see what sort of man snaps a trap shut and then stands inside it," she said. "To see if he is clever enough to have an exit he has not shown me. To see if he is fool enough to wait while I look for it." "Have you found one?" Ned asked. "I always find one," she said. And in that moment he could not tell whether she lied or whether she simply willed truth into the world with the force of her saying. "You mean to send for Stannis. He will come. He will expect gratitude and obedience. You will give him both and keep the queen and the children as your shield." She tilted her head. "My father will not try to break you in the open while I stand with my children in your cage. He knows better than any man alive the value of a hostage. He kept a Tarbeck, did you know? In a cell above his own bedchamber for a year. He slept very well. He does not sleep well now. I put you there," Ned said, and let there be no apology in the words. "For the realm's sake." Her eyes glinted. "Oh, I do not quarrel with your reason," she said. "It is your certainty that offends me." She took a step closer. "You have not told them yet." "No," Ned said. "Will you?" Her voice was so soft then that if he had not been a man with northern ears, he might have missed it. "Will you say it in the hall with the hats listening? My golden boys are not his." She said it in the tone of a person who names an old wound to show that it did not hurt any longer. He did not answer. "Your daughter loves mine," she added after a heartbeat. She wept to be kept from him. "She is a child," Ned said, and there was more pain in that than he would have chosen to show her, but he did not take it back. He had no wish to be other than he was in front of her and let her see some steel where she thought to find softness. Cersei smiled. "We were all children once," she said. "Do not forget, Lord Stark. If the truth is a stone that breaks the world, you are a man who likes stones. Do not pretend to me that you will not throw it." "Not today," he said. "Tomorrow then," she whispered, satisfied. "Perhaps I will write lines for the singers. They like tragedy." She looked back at the water. "You will lose," she added, as if suggesting a hat that might suit his head better than the one he had chosen. "Perhaps," he said, "but not before I make it very dear." She looked at him then as if she could at last see some shape inside him that interested her. "There is the wolf," she said softly. "I wondered where it had gone." He said nothing and let her leave the room by the door she had used to enter. He watched and saw nothing move that looked like a door, and felt the old truth of Castle's press against his skin again. Nothing built by men kept men from other men long when the men were determined. He would have to make the determination itself into his wall. Night came down. The city breathed. A shout carried up from the river. Laughter edged with hard metal. The bells slept. The stars powdered the sky thinly. In the holdfast, Arya talked to her sword softly as a girl whispers to a dog to teach it is hers. Sansa stared at the ceiling and tried to imagine Joffrey's face when he was kind and found that she could not do it without adding kindness with her own hand around the edges like embroidery. Cersei fed Myrcella oranges with her own fingers and watched her daughter's lips close on each wedge as if sealing a compact with herself. Renly sat with Loras and counted up men like coppers, and set them out upon the map and then pushed them up again because maps are kinder than roads. Varys wrote 6 notes, read each twice, and burned 3. Littlefinger sat with 2 candles lit and a book open and saw neither. His thoughts went to a river that had once run very clear and the look on a girl's face when a boy promised something he could not give. Janos Slynt drank with Alardeem and laughed until his mouth filled with spittle, thought of gold, and then thought of fear and found that it had the same taste. Ned slept an hour. In that hour he dreamed he stood in Winterfell's Godswood where the heart tree's red leaves hung like flags in rain. The face in the trunk looked down at him and did not change though the mouth's carved lips moved. He could not hear what it said because in the dream the bells were ringing again and again. He woke and the bells were not ringing, only his own heart. He rose and bathed in water so warm it might as well have been his own blood. He dressed slowly, setting each piece of himself in place. Shirt, jerkin, surcoat, belt. Like a man making an offering to some invisible exacting god. He tied his hair back with a strip of leather. He went to the window and watched dawn prepare itself beyond the eastern walls like a woman arranging braids. He thought of Stannis's face, spare and hard, the mouth grieved and unyielding. He thought of Catelyn's hands when she was angry, still hands, not trembling ones, as if the anger made her hold steadier. He thought of Robert, and the fat old ridiculous man's eyes when they had met last, and the boy's eyes beneath them when the laugh was gone. He went to the council chamber because to keep moving is the best way to remain a shape and not blur into a feeling. Men came, papers came, bread came, the air thickened. The day grew itself upon the bones of the night's work. He had not yet put the truth into the air when the first raven returned. The bird had a bite taken out of one wing, as if some smaller thing had decided to begin with it and lacked the courage to persist. It struck the sill, flurried, and let the boy-catcher take it in hands that knew it and did not fear its beak. The wax on the letter at its leg was cracked. The boy brought it to Ned with a face alight and shamed at the same time to have run so fast. The seal showed a flaming heart. Men saw it and made faces as if they tasted something. Renly barked a laugh and made himself stop when he saw that no one else had found it amusing. Littlefinger's gaze fixed upon that small red device as if it were a coin with the wrong king's face in the right place. Ned broke the seal. The letters were done in a cramped, unlovely hand that pushed too hard with its quill. They said what he had expected. I come. Hold what you may hold. The law will have me as it was meant to have me. Burn the rot. There was more. Stannis wrote like a man hammering in nails, each short line a blow. Tyrells will not succor me. Brother is false. Brother will be answered. The Onion Knight sails. Trust him. There were names and ports and a cold rectitude that made the hairs on Ned's arms lift. Not in fear. The last line had been written and then scratched and rewritten. Keep them safe until I come. Ned folded the letter and tucked it inside his belt where the other lay. They made a wait there together like a promise. He lifted his eyes and men around the table looked at him with different hungers. Stannis comes, he said. Of course he does, Renly said very softly. Then the game is begun, Littlefinger murmured. It was always begun, Varys said, and his smile was not unkind. Ned looked toward the window where sunlight spilled upon the stone, and for a heartbeat he saw winter on that stone. A hoarfrost that would not melt, a cleanliness that made one's lungs feel they had finally been rinsed. It vanished. The city smoked and muttered and shifted itself. Within Maegor's holdfast iron bars held. Beyond them desires ran like rats, seeking their holes and one another. He put his hand upon the table and spoke, slow and low and sure, a northern man among southern songs. The day answered him with work, Above the red keep a hawk lifted and turned in a circle too wide for the men below to see as one thing. They saw only brief crossings against the sun and called them birds who did not know it. EY were one hawk making one slow, patient plan. It was not the sound of the raven's claws on stone that Ned remembered afterward, not the ragged breath of the boy who brought it, nor even the faint smear of salt on the parchment as if the bird had flown through sea mist. It was the weight the letter made when he tucked it beside Robert's last command. Two pieces of paper lying together like paired bones, and the whole castle had begun to arrange itself around them as if those words had been timbers sunk into wet earth. He looked once more at the cramped, uncompromising hand. Ikome, hold what you may hold. Burn the rot. Trust him. Keep them safe until I come. He let the letters go. He set his palms upon the table's edge and felt the wood's heat. Stannis comes, he said, and the chamber took the words as a room takes the first draft of a storm. Shutters breathed, a hanging map stirred. Men leaned in without knowing they did. Renly's eyes went half-lidded and then open again as if he had forced them to by will. Littlefinger drew a dangling quill across the edge of his nail and left a faint line of ink there that he seemed to admire. Varys examined the way the rising air curled the corner of a paper near his sleeve and put his finger upon it almost tenderly. Pycelle, catching the name too late, made a pious murmur like a bee that had lodged in an old man's beard and found no flowers there. Barristan Selmy's mouth did not change. "We will call oaths this afternoon," Ned said. "In the throne room. Those lords presently in the city will attend. The High Septon will be asked to witness. The gold cloaks will be set at each door. We will read the king's letter publicly. And you will name Stannis," Renly said. It was not a question, only a quiet naming of a cost he could count to the farthing. "I will name the law," Ned answered. "That is the same thing today," Renly murmured without looking at Loras, who watched the back of Renly's neck as if he might read there some line that had not yet been written. Littlefinger smiled with his eyes. "You will forgive me, my lord, if I point out that oaths taken in the heat of a morning have a way of cooling toward sup," he said gently. "Men swear readily when bells are still in their ears. They do not love to discover at dusk what they have sworn to cost them." "Then we will tie some of the knots before dusk," Ned replied. "Janos Slynt will give me his word in the presence of his captains. I will set men I trust at the Red Keep's inner gates. Renly," he turned to the younger Baratheon, "send to the city armories. Lock them each with your seal and mine. We will issue steel to the watch in the morning in companies, not all at once, and take account of each sword given and hand that holds it." Renly's mouth quirked. "You intend to feed my brother his own medicine," he said. "Very good. He coughs on it." Varys spread his soft fingers. "Oaths, seals, swords," he breathed. "Our table lacks only coin and bread. You shall have both," Littlefinger said lightly, and watched the relief glance off Janos Slynt's face wherever in the city the man presently stood drinking. "The master of coin has his friends. He will ask them to be generous, and they will be generous because they will wish to be his friends tomorrow as well. See that you ask loudly enough for them to hear you over their own dinners," Ned said. "They hear me in their sleep." Littlefinger's lashes lowered as if the line had charmed even him. "Who will stand at your side beneath the dragon skulls when the oaths are offered, my lord? Men like to know by which shadows they swear." "Ser Barristan," Ned said. "And Lord Renly." Pycelle clasped his hands as if in prayer. "A noble sight," he hummed. Varys looked up sideways through lowered lids. "And Ser Mandon?"
Ser Boros?
"Ser Marin?" he asked, trying the white names like stones he might yet find smooth. "They are sworn to the king." "Let them be there," Ned said. "They will hear the oaths and see the letter." He thought of Cersei's cool mouth, the way she had said tomorrow and been satisfied. He would not give her the truth yet, not for the thrill she would take in watching it break against him. He would give her the law instead, which she despised, which might hold. When the council broke, each man made a show of business like a juggler easing back from his tricks without letting a single ball drop. Varys murmured condolences to no one in particular and drifted off in a scent of powder faint as flour. Pycelle allowed a boy to fold his chain twice and stumbled out with dignity. Littlefinger lingered long enough to pluck up a coin from the table, make it walk along his knuckles, and set it down again so precisely that it seemed the coin's choice to be in the same place it had left. "I will send for the High Septon," he said, "and for hats that are too tall to be owned by anyone but Lady Tanda." He smiled. She loves a show. Renly and Loras went out together. They walked close but did not touch. Ned watched them go and thought of the way Cersei had looked at Renly and called him brother-in-law, like a man lifting a trout to admire its color before flinging it back. There were too many fish in his pond now and not enough pans. He went first to the holdfast court to see with his own eyes what his men's mouths would otherwise tell him. The bridge stood with the light laying its long knife along the spine of stone. Guards in green and gold stood at the crown with spears bright as wheat. Within the inner door, Tomard's bulk filled the space like a piece of furniture too big to move once set down. He had his hands clasped over his belly and looked like a man waiting on a berth. When he saw Ned, some of the lines in his face loosened. "All quiet?" Ned asked. "They breathe," Tomard said. "The boy snarls. And the hound." "His eyes are not quiet," Tomard answered, and Ned accepted that as the best report he would have. The Queen's apartments lay to the left of the stair. A septa sat just beyond, the whites of her eyes prominent as if piety had scoured the pigment out of them. From within came a girl's voice reading, halting, determined, and Cersei's, smooth as poured oil when it came, not reading, speaking to the other voice with a patience that would have struck some men as virtue. Ned did not go in. He went instead to the nursery. Sandor Clegane sat with one boot on a stool, a whetstone in his hand and a long dagger upon his knee. He drew the stone along the edge with calm strokes as if the metal's song pleased him. Tommen lay on his stomach upon a rug with painted foxes and counted them with a forefinger, whispering numbers beneath his breath and losing his place and starting again. When he saw Ned, he scrambled to his knees and then to his feet with an unsteady gravity, as if he were pledging not to fall rather than standing by success. "Good day, Your Grace," Ned said, because kindness cost nothing and might buy a little of a boy's strength. Tommen's cheeks went pink. He looked at Sandor to see if he were permitted to answer, and the hound made a noise in his throat that might have been a laugh with all the mirth taken out. "Good day," Tommen said. He had a cat's hair clinging to his sleeve. Ned plucked it off without thinking, and Tommen watched the act in fascination, as if the hair had been a silver thread drawn from his skin. "You have a cat?" Ned asked. "3, Tommen said, and held up 3 fingers. He faltered when his little finger would not stay straight and put his hand behind his back lest anyone see. "Mother says I may keep them if I remember to feed them." "I remember." "I believe you," Ned said. Sandor's stone made one last whisper, and he set it down. "You should keep him," he told Ned conversationally, as a man might speak of a good plow horse. "He doesn't bite yet." Tommen blinked. "I don't bite," he said gravely. "Joff." He stopped and pressed his lips together and looked away because he had meant to say something that would have been unkind and did not know how to finish the sentence without the unkindness still in it. "Where is your brother?" Ned asked. "In the other room," Sandor answered. He picked up a rag and began to polish the blade. "Counting ways he will kill you. He's up to 12. 9 of them are not possible, but he'll find a man to try them just the same." "Will you be that man?" Ned asked. Sandor's good eye lifted to his face. It held a bleak amusement, like a light far out at sea that a sailor watches knowing he cannot reach it and will not drown by watching. "Not for him," he said. "For coin? For a dog? For someone who makes me want to see his blood? Perhaps. For him? No." He looked back down at the blade. "I'll keep the boy from being trampled in your stampede," he added after a moment. "I won't let him trample others if I can help it. That's the best song I sing." It was more than Ned had asked and more than Sandor had needed to say. He nodded, a bow a man makes to a hard truth when it does not insult him. "Keep him safe," he said. "Keep your own," Sandor returned, and for an instant Ned did not know whether he meant Sansa and Arya or the law and his own good name. By noon, the throne room's heat lay on the air like a cloak soaked in warm water and wrung only halfway out. The skulls of the old dragons hung along the walls, their ebon hollows taking little interest in the business of men. Torches guttered and then burned steady. The seven-pointed star above the dais caught light and let it go without keeping any. Men came. They rustled and muttered and sat and rose. The high septon approached ponderously and took the best chair, as if it had been carved in the morning out of fat especially for him. Lords in their half-satins and half-armors put their swords down with little clicks that scattered like pebbles. The king's guard stood white and erect, three of them together like a fence, Barristan apart, the fence with its own gate. Janos Slynt marched in with a round stomach and a flushed face and gave Ned as deep a bow as he had ever given any man. His captains watched him and watched Ned and watched the coils of the gold chain around Littlefinger's neck and did their sums. Renly took his place without pomp, Loras at his shoulder in green that shone like a spring leaf under rain. Varys slid in like a fish. Pycelle arranged his chain so the hammered links spelled out words only he could read. Ned did not sit upon the king's chair. He stood upon the stair below it with the letter in his hand. He spoke. He did not speak long. The words needed were few and heavy. "King Robert Baratheon is dead," he said. "These are his last orders." He read the letter. The chamber listened. Some faces sorrowed, some counted. Some went pleasantly blank and let the ears do their work. "I will keep the peace and the law as protector of the realm," Ned said, "until the rightful successor is crowned. I will require your oaths to that law." He did not say Stannis. He let the words settle and the lords look at one another and see that there was time to ask which king when it was safe to ask it. Then he lifted his chin at Barristan Selmy, and the old knight stepped forward onto the stair, the white of him plain as snow. "I will serve the law," Barristan said. His voice was not loud, yet it carried, as if the stones liked to carry it for him. "I will serve the protector until a rightful king is crowned. I will keep faith with my oath." The murmur that ran through the room did a different work now. Men who had remembered that Barristan Selmy could kill them by mistake remembered also that he had lived his whole life by measures other men only claimed to understand. Janos Slynt went to one knee with the steadiness of a priest who meant to rise again. "The city watch keeps the peace," he declared. "The watch serves the king. The watch serves the protector until a king is crowned." His captains bent reluctantly, and the sound of their kneeling was less pious. One man's knee clinked on the floor, and it sounded exactly like a small lie dropped in front of a careful man. Renly stepped forward. He did not kneel. He did not swear. He merely drew the eyes, because he knew how and because men like to look at a handsome man who looks back at them and does not one bit care what they think of him. "For the peace of the realm," he said. "For our brother's memory." He inclined his head and smiled in a way that could be called loyalty by a man who wished to think well of him and no more by a man who did not. Lords followed. Some spoke stoutly, with their weight upon their words. Others let the sounds pass their lips without putting any meat behind them. The High Septon folded his hands and declared himself the god's servant, which meant whatever a man with the coin to spend needed it to mean for the length of a meal.
Ser Mandon Murbaud.
Ser Marin Trant pursed his lips as if tasting something sour and did likewise. Ser Boros Blunt sighed as if he had been made to walk 2 flights of stairs and then gave the form of obedience. The skulls on the walls did not laugh. When it ended, the room had changed only on the face of it. Men had tied themselves in knots that would hold through the afternoon. Night would see who picked at them with a knife. Afterward, when the hats were gone and the torches hissed and the great doors boomed closed, Varys remained. He approached the stair with his hands rolled together as if he meant to make a child's ball out of them. "So civil," he breathed. "So presentable." Ned folded the letter and tucked it away. "You may dislike the taste," he said. "You cannot deny that it feeds." "Oh, I do not deny anything that pleases me," Varys said. "There is one thing more that would please me, my lord. There is a man with a ship who would like to see you by night." He tilted his head like a bird listening for a worm beneath the grass. "He calls himself no lord at all. He smells of tar. He says Lord Stannis sent him. He has a name that is not at home in this court. Shall we leave him on the quay to be counted by the rats?" "Bring him," Ned said, before Littlefinger could slide between the words and suggest a dinner to test the man. Or Renly could frown and imagine a trap he would prefer to spring himself. Quietly, "No cloak of yours will be kept if you tear it so often." Varys's smile was like the shadow of a smile. "My closets are deep," he murmured. "I have many cloaks." He slid away. Renly came and took hold of Ned's arm just above the elbow. A grip a man gives another in public because he will not use the one that draws a friend close. "You must not let him bring spiders into your bed," he said, "or into your holdfast." "I will not," Ned returned, and disliked how easily the answer had come. Renly's thumb moved once upon Ned's sleeve as if counting, and fell away. "Littlefinger will buy Slint," he said, as if naming whether. "I will buy him back. It will cost. Be prepared to lend me Casterly Rock to pay my debts." "I do not possess it," Ned said, and Renly's smile flashed brief and bright. "Nor do they if you win this game," he said, and left with Loras, who did not look back this time. North of the city, where the wheat broke green upon the Redwine Road, a horse went down under a tired hedge knight and did not rise, and no one cared. At Harrenhal, the wind moaned through blackened towers and came out the other side the same wind. Tywin Lannister sat in a hall big enough to hold 3 small keeps and read the neat, unelaborated hand of a man in King's Landing who knew how to make a thing heavy by writing it plain. His own hand put a brush stroke across 3 lines. He did not ring for a servant. He had never liked to ring when his hand was good. He had sent for Ser Adam Marbrand an hour ago. When Ser Adam came, Tywin held the letter without lifting it and said, "They have taken the Queen and my grandchildren into Maegor's holdfast." Adam's handsome face did not change as much as a lesser man's would have. He had a painter's eyes. They saw what color a thing truly wore. "Clever," he said. "Costly." Tywin's mouth made an unamused curve. "They have bought time," he said. "Time is dear. We will make it dearer." "Ride on the city?" Ser Adam asked. He did not ask from appetite. He asked because he weighed and wanted the right weight to set in the right pan. "Ride on the Riverlands," Tywin said. "If Eddard Stark has gone to the trouble to make himself protector, let him protect. Let him protect all the things protector means while he sleeps with my daughter's name on his lips. Send word to Ser Jaime. The Tullus are old and fattened by soft years. Squeeze them until the juice runs down the city's chin." Adam nodded. "I will send riders. You will carry a letter to Janos Slint," Tywin added, and lifted the parchment at last, letting it unroll like a rich man's towel. "Not this. It must be written again for his taste. Add to it the smell of coin. Tell him to keep the peace by all means that do not return my blood to me with a hole in it." "He will take it," Adam said, and allowed himself the smallest of smiles. "He is a gold cloak." "Then let him earn the medal," Tywin returned. He did not raise his voice. He never did. The great hall swallowed anger like a pond swallows small stones. "Find me the names of the men who stand at the Queen's door. Send them gifts. Send their sisters dowries. Purchase the mother of the man who fetches their water. Make brooms fall in their kitchens and see who stoops to pick them up. If a man has a cousin in my camp, give him a better cousin in the city. If he is from the Crownlands, tell him of lands further inland that would suit him. If he is from the north, tell him his mother coughs blood. Send a letter in a familiar hand. Men are unlocked by their own lives." He set the brush down. "Do not force a lock while a key can be found." Adam took the commission like a dagger laid flat upon his palm and bowed his head as if to breathe upon it. "It will be done. It will be started," Tywin said. "Do not tell me a thing is done until I hold it in my hand." On Dragonstone, the sea ate the cliff by inches and the castle's dragons stared into a fog that had settled and refused to lift, as if it meant to own the island the way men owned one another. Stannis sat by a narrow window and read his own letter once more as if the ink had been laid by someone else and might have betrayed him in the writing. Davos Seaworth stood at a careful remove, cap twisting in his hands because he had never learned to keep them still when the truth itched beneath his skin. "He will read the law," Davos said, when Stannis said nothing long enough to make the air taste of waiting. "He is that sort of man. He will not break your words, my lord." "He will break sooner or later," Stannis said. The mouth that never smiled did not smile in derision now. It held a grief men mistook for cruelty. "They all do. The law is a beam you brace through a house. If you mean to hold up a tower with it, it will crack. But," he added, and his eyes turned from the fog to Davos without softening, "some houses stand a winter for having had the beam where it belonged. He has bought me time." He stood abruptly and turned on his heel. "You will go." "I have gone," Davos said, and touched the salt on his sleeve that had dried there hours ago with the memory of spray. "I rode under the walls with the tide, and Garrod Blackfist's boy pulled me in by the arm like a herring." A rough grin threatened his mouth without committing. "You would not have liked it, my lord." There were rat's eyes in the crevices, shining. "I left liking behind with laughter," Stannis said dryly. "Did he see you?" "A spider with a perfumer's hands," Davos said. He did not much like saying it. "He knew my name, which put me in no mood to tell him what else I knew. He made me wait in a closet with tapestries that smelled of dust. Then he brought me along a way no man should know without confessing to a god. Stark was there before the tapestries were done with me. He looks like a piece of iron that has been hammered straight again after being bent. He believes you will come. He will not say your name out loud until he has to. He keeps the queen in a cage. He says he will shield the children with his life." Davos scratched above the stump of one finger where the skin always itched in damp weather. "He is the sort of man who says that and has the life to spend." Stannis's gaze held him as a tired man will hold a rope. Not because he loves the feel of it, but because it is what keeps him above a drop. "And the Lannister girl? She plays the lady with a Septa's hands," Davos said. "She plays the mother with a counting house mind. She is measuring how long his cage's bars are and what sort of metal. She is thinking of a file." Stannis's jaw moved once. "Let her think," he said. "She thinks with her father's blood. It runs to gold. It runs also to punishment. If she breaks the cage by force, she will splinter her own hands on it. If she breaks it with cunning and luck, we will seize luck by the throat and shake it until it drops what it has stolen." He looked down at the parchment and back up. "I told him to keep them safe. I do not say such things for the shape of the words." "No," Davos said. He had sailed with men who flattered and lied and made oaths the way a boy makes paper boats to float on puddles. He had not sailed with Stannis because of the man's manner, but because of what happened to the sea when the man fixed it with his eye. "He heard you. He keeps a north in his head, my lord. It points to his own true place whether or not the needle loves it." Stannis made a small sound that could almost have been a laugh had it not been so dry. "He is a man for whom men will walk into snow," he said. "Very well. We will give him the snow. Sail with the tide. The wind will blow foul 3 hours, then veer. Hug the coast and do not try to show your seamanship to anyone. If the watch stops you, tell them you are bringing oysters." "Bring oysters?" "Aye," Davos said, and went to do a smuggler's work for a lord. He would have followed into a worse fog than the one that pressed upon Dragonstone this morning, as if it had been made to humble the sea. He came by night, slipping into the Blackwater like a man who knows the ways a river hides from itself. The moon gave little light. The stars seemed far away, as if they were keeping their counsel. Davos counted his stroke and the breath between strokes and the small white place where the water sucked at a broken piling near the Kettle Black Quay. He put the skiff's nose toward a black bite in the wall where fishermen's boys lost their virginity to girls with salt on their lips. A shape detached itself from the dark and became 2 men with a rope. Davos stilled his arms but did not let the oars drop. One of the men smelled of garlic. The other smelled of nothing at all, which was when Davos recognized him. "You appear everywhere like a well-trained moth," he said under his breath. "A man could make coin wagering on it." Varys smiled faintly. If only more men wagered on inevitabilities, he whispered. This would be a calmer city. He lifted the rope with 2 fingers as if it were a ruby necklace. This way, if you will be so obliging as to keep your oars quiet. The stones are jealous tonight. He took Davos along a corridor that ran beside water and under stone and rose by steps that remembered the Romans who had taught them how to hold a foot. They passed a door too small for a large man and too stout for a small one. Davos, who knew doors' minds, did not look at it because some doors open for those who look as much as for those who push. They came into a passage that smelled of salt and candle grease, and another man joined them with a light held low. Ned was waiting in a room where the walls were thicker than any 2 men's arms put together. The chair he had chosen faced no door directly, a habit without paranoia, a veteran's seat. When Davos came in, Tomard started forward from the wall and then looked to Ned, who lifted his hand. The hound stood in the far corner with his shoulder against stone and his arms folded, as if the corner had been put there for him and he was making it earn its keep. "You are Stannis's man," Ned said. He did not make it question or compliment or challenge. He gave the man a name to meet him with. "I am Davos," he answered. "Men call me the Onion Knight when they want to flatter me and a smuggler when they want to be precise." He tugged his forelock as if the sea had put him to that habit, and he did not mean to insult land with finery. "My lord, you had oysters?" Sandor drawled. "I would eat an oyster." "I'll bring you a barrel when this is over," Davos said, and found that he meant it. "If I am alive to roll it to you." "If you are dead," Sandor said without blinking, "I will fish with the barrel's staves. Life and death both go to my advantage. It is a comfort." "Stannis writes that he comes," Ned said, pulling them back to the place men leave when they talk to make time pass. "He writes that I should keep my prisoners safe and my hands clean and my courage up." "He writes as if he were nailing boards," Davos agreed. "He says what he means, and then he says it again so the wind does not blow it out before the nails bite." Ned looked at him over steepled fingers, the way a mason will look at a block he intends to set above a doorway to see if it will crack. "Tell me what he will expect," he said. "When he comes, he will expect you to tell the truth in a way that makes men ashamed of how they have been living with lies," Davos said, and saw no point gilding the chili. "He will expect you to say at last what the realm already knows and pretends not to. He will expect you to show how that truth is not a flame but a lamp." Ned's jaw worked once. He had known the words would march down this hall. "And if it is a flame, then we burn together," Davos said simply. "Better fire than rot." He thought of the red woman's eyes. He disliked thinking of them and pushed the thought away. "He asks that you keep the queen alive and her children. I tell you he means it. My lord is not a man to make a shape of mercy with his mouth and then dig the teeth in when a man relaxes. He means what he means." "He means to win," Sandor said from the corner. "And to know he did it according to some book he thinks the world was written to follow." Davos shrugged. "He does not think the world was written to follow the book. He thinks the book was written to show the way the world ought to be. He thinks men can walk like that if they choose. He thinks the ones who won't should be made to by law." He grinned suddenly, irreverence breaking out like sun upon water. "It is a hard religion. I follow it because it makes him predictable, and because he does not let the sea of himself drown me. I have sailed with lords who change with every rumor. Stannis changes when the truth changes. That is seldom. Your Stannis will expect me to name the incest," Ned said at last, the word plain on his tongue. "He will expect me to tear the veil." Davos's face did not change. "He will," he said. "He expects men to be able to drink what they pour for others. If the wine is sour, call it sour. Do not add honey. Do not call it water." Ned stared at the wall past Davos's shoulder. The stones were old. They had been set by hands that were dust now. "There is a girl in that holdfast who loves the boy," he said. Davos nodded. "There is a boy in that holdfast who is not a king. You must pour for both of them and drink." Ned closed his eyes for a moment and saw ice upon branches, and the way a winter sun makes ice look like a thing grown from trees by patience alone. "When?" he asked, his voice lower. "When the city has heard the law," Davos said. "When the watch has been paid. When Ser Barristan has stood beside you twice and not flinched. When Renly has had his chance to be noble and found that he prefers to be loved. Tonight is too soon. Tomorrow is not too late." Ned opened his eyes. He looked at Sandor Clegane, who looked back with the bleak attention of a man who has long since learned to attend bleakly. "Can I keep the queen alive if I light that fire?" Ned asked him without irony. Sandor's mouth moved. "You can keep her alive," he said. "You cannot keep her unarmed." "She is unarmed now," Tomard grunted from the wall. "We took every pin from her hair." "Pins are not what you should have taken," Sandor said, and Ned did not ask him whether he meant her pride or her hope or her children's love. When Davos left, he left without bowing extravagantly or making pledges he could not keep. Varys disappeared before him like a scent on a wind that had turned. Tomard barred the door and leaned his weight against it for a moment as if his flesh could make iron and oak safer. Ned sat without meaning to, the chair accepting him like the hand of a friend who loved him and held no counsel. Night moved. The red keep creaked. Men's plans rubbed against one another like branches in wind and made a faint, thin music. Cersei did not sleep. She sat with Myrcella's head in her lap again and watched the room change with the hour. The candles wore down. Shadows moved gently across the floor. Bars across bars, as if the light itself were caged. Myrcella's breath had the small whistling sound children's breath sometimes makes when they sleep hard and well after fear. Joffrey had argued himself to tears and then to a young man's exhausted pride and slept on a bench with his mouth open, dreaming no doubt of a world that obeyed him when he could not bear it. Tommen, earlier carried away by Sandor and placed in his bed like a bundle of laundry, had flung himself sideways in his dreams and kicked his coverlet to the floor. Clegane had come and laid it back over him with an expression that was almost irritation, and Cersei had wanted to thank him and had not, because she did not give things to men unless they could spend them to her benefit. She knew the holdfast doors better now than she had when they brought her across the bridge. She knew where the guards stood and how they shifted. She knew which of them had nerves that showed in the throat and which had faces like slabs. She had learned 4 names and repeated them to herself in different orders until she could call each one without hunting it. She had found the stones that were warm to the touch at night and the stones that stayed cool no matter how the day had burned. She knew how far a woman's shout carried into the inner yard and whether a child's cry carried farther. Her father had once told her that men who did not measure the rooms they were caged in were fools. His voice in memory had not been unkind. When the sun took the steps of the sky again, Renly came to pace in the yard with Loras and speak in low tones to Lord Parman and Ser Emmon. He did not come to the queen. That was wise. She would have smiled for him and slipped a W into his ear. Around the 2nd hour, a rider came in through the river gate with foam at his horse's chest and a tie of black cloth around his left arm. The word passed from mouth to mouth, thinning in places and fattening in others, and reached the throne room where Ned sat with a scribe and 3 lords who had business with the master of coin and wanted it dealt with as if there were not just then a realm tilting on its axis. The rider waited in a chamber that had once held a harpist on certain feast days. Now it held 3 shabby tapestries and a table where men had cut bread with their belt knives for a year. He stood with his shoulders straight and his eyes gone far. "From Lord Hoster Tully," he said when Ned came. "If you are Lord Eddard, my lord. If you are the hand. If you are protector." I was told 3 names. He held out the parchment without looking at it. Ned broke the seal. The hand was not Hoster's. The letters angled on the page with brisquety, the ink black as a cormorant's wing. Brynden, Ned thought before he read the name at the end. The lines were tight and very few. The Riverlands burned. Jaime Lannister had taken the field and driven Edmure back on Riverrun. The young lord had been wounded and born within the castle, where old Hoster now lay worse. Ser Adam Marbrand rode, and Ser Forley Prester, and Vance and Piper fought on their own doorsteps. The King's Road had seen 3 hangings where there had been 1 last year. "Come," Brynden wrote, because you are the river's son by your marriage, and because we have seen the wolf keep his word before. Come or send. Send not only words. Send steel." Ned closed his eyes and saw the fords of the Tumblestone, gray water over brown stone, the white rush of it when snow melted too quickly. He saw Caitlyn's face when she had laughed in the Godswood, and when she had been angry, and when she had said his name in bed with a fear in it that had not been for him. He felt the letter in his hand like an accusation. "I will send," he said aloud, and heard the way the words did not yet know what they meant. "Send steel." "You cannot leave the city," Lord Renly said later in the council chamber. He had brought Loras in with him in open defiance of men who might frown and ask him to leave his shadow outside. "If you go, Littlefinger and the spider will divide your chair between them and play dice upon it. If you stay, the Riverlands will think you care only for your high walls and your fine title." "I have never cared for a title," Ned said. "Then care for a message," Renly returned. "Send the right man with the right words. If you send the wrong man, my brother Stannis will set him aside when he arrives, and you will have bought yourself 2 enemies with 1 letter." "Who is the right man?" Littlefinger asked, too pleasant. "Not you," Renly said sweetly. Ned sank his knuckles into the wood of the table. "I will send a knight of the Kingsguard with the letters to Riverrun and to the lords who hold the trident," he said. "If the law is to be believed, it will be believed more readily with white beside it." "Ser Boros," Littlefinger suggested at once, close to purring. "Ser Barristan," Ned said, and saw the flinch the other man could not hide. Barristan Selmy bowed his head once. "As you command. I will bring your words to Lord Hoster. I will tell them what you have done and what you mean to do." He straightened. "I will return before a king stands in the hall." "Ser Barristan," Varys observed mildly, "is not so easily replaced as men believe." Then, almost as an afterthought, "You will need another white cloak to stand beside you when the candles are low and the wolves you call law look more like dogs." "I will stand alone if I must," Ned said. It sounded foolish even to his own ears. He hated that it did. He hated the truth in it more. He took the hour before supper to walk the Red Keep's walls, because a man thinks more rightly in air that has not passed through other men's lungs 3 times. The city tilted away beneath him in all directions, roofs like scales, alleys like scars. The bay's skin lay stretched with the first reflections of afternoon's red. A wind came off the water that did not cool so much as scrape, as if it could slough a man's heat off him like dead skin. He felt a presence fall in step beside him and did not turn until the man had walked a dozen paces within the space he had reserved for thinking alone. Littlefinger showed him his hands as if to prove he had no weapon and then put them behind his back. "Your raven flew to Dragonstone," he said conversationally. "It came back. The wind says Stannis comes." He tilted his head, listening to a wind that was his alone. "He will have a woman with him, red silks, eyes like lamps under still water. She looks at men as if she knows what their bones will do when fire finds them. I think I shall not attend her sermons." Ned kept his gaze on the bay. A pair of gulls argued over something white and tattered in the shallows. "Do not," he said. "You do not ask me how I know," Littlefinger said, almost offended. "You know everything that you can make use of," Ned said, "and some things you cannot. You are a man who keeps dead flowers just to see if the smell will come back." "That is unfair," Littlefinger said, his smile not offended in the least. "I keep dead flowers to remind myself what living ones demand in coin. Your Stannis will bring a book and a sword. The book will say that a king's sons should be like him in more than his appetites. The sword will enforce it. The queen will bring a look and a whisper. The look will say what a pity. The whisper will tell a man's wife that the protector looked at her in a way she liked." He waved his hand, a courtier's weary dismissal. "We will not need Cersei to whisper that. There are other women." "Peter," Ned said, using the name as a hand on a man's shoulder, because sometimes a man will stop when a name his mother used enters a room. "Do not play games with children in the room." "I do not," Littlefinger answered promptly. "It is the children who play with us." He sobered, which was rare enough that Ned turned his head despite himself. "I will keep your coin flowing," he said. "I will keep Slint from selling you to the highest bidder before the bidding gets interesting. I will tell the Tyrells that if they will drink from this cup now, they can put their lips on it later. If you mean to say the thing you mean to say—" He flicked his glance toward Maegor's holdfast. "Say it before Renly decides that law is a table set for men with green cloaks." "I will," Ned said. "Will you?" Littlefinger's smile returned, thinner. "You are a man who holds his breath under water longer than most. I listen for the bubbles." He left, and the wall's wind resumed its solitary work, wearing its stone with the patience that keeps a city honest in its corners. By evening, the kitchen sent up a supper of barley stew and 2 loaves that cracked with a wholesome sound when broken. Ned ate with Arya and Sansa because he could not bear to have them eat elsewhere, and because he wished to watch their faces when the day's talk turned, as it always did, toward the thing that lay at the center of all of it. Arya picked onions out with the tip of her wooden spoon and flicked them onto her bread and ate them like a fox eating eggs. Sansa ate small bites and set them in order in her mouth, swallowing a thought with each morsel as if it might be simpler to digest with food. "I saw Princess Myrcella," Sansa said at last, with a care that would have made a sheet of glass proud. "Septa Mordain, Septa Una," she faltered over the southern woman's name. "Brought her to the balcony in the other court for sun." She waved. "Did you wave back?" Ned asked. Sansa flicked a look toward Arya, who was not listening and was listening all at once. "I curtsied," she said. "It was proper." "It was kind," Ned corrected. "That is proper enough." Sansa looked down as if the praise were a weight she had not expected. "Father," she said then, almost roughly, which was as near as she came to boldness, "Joffrey is sorry." Arya made a noise at the back of her throat. Syrio Farrell, who had accepted Ned's invitation to eat and did so with a grace that made the plain stew seem a delicate dish, turned his head minutely and did not deign to look at the child who had made the sound. "Words," he said. "They are wind in a room. They make the candle flicker. Sometimes they blow the candle out. Which is this?" "He sent me a message," Sansa went on, as if Arya had not spoken and Syrio had not either. "He says he is sorry we are kept apart, and he will speak to you when he is allowed and make all well." She lifted her eyes, prettily, in a way that would have worked on a kinder father or a worse man. "May I write to him?" Ned had known this would come, as he had known that winter would come in his childhood. As a matter of course, not to be resented, not to be bargained with. "You may write," he said. Arya's eyes widened in incredulity. Sansa's face lit as if a singer had struck a pleasing string. "You will give the letter to Tomard. He will give it to me. If I find it proper in all ways, I will have it sent under my seal." Sansa's mouth opened and closed. She wanted to ask what proper meant and dared not. "Thank you," she whispered. "Say what you like of your heart," Ned added, because he had not entirely turned to iron. "Do not say anything of doors or bars or where men stand. Do not say anything that would move men with swords." Sansa swallowed. A bit of stew went down wrong with it, and she coughed and blinked and then smiled again. "I understand." Arya crunched an onion. "If you put his name on a piece of paper, you'll make it dirty," she said. Sansa's head turned so sharply she might have hurt her neck had anger not softened it. "You hate everything I love," she burst out. "You would pull the petals from flowers and leave the stalks for the goats." "I like goats," Arya said. "They are honest." She shoved her bowl away. "May I go with Syrio now?" "Finish your bread," Ned said, and she devoured it in 3 bites, wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, and went with the bravo, who lifted his brows at Ned in a half apology for the girl's lack of graces and a half compliment for the substance that had been hammered into her bones by the North. After supper, Sansa wrote. She bent over the small table with frowning concentration, her tongue showing the smallest degree at one corner of her mouth. Ned watched without seeming to. The lines that formed were in a pretty hand, learned at Winterfell with Septa Mordain's gentle pride and a switch when needed. She wrote of missing Joffrey, of prayers said, of hope for his patience. She wrote nothing about keys or guards or doors. She did not need to. Cersei would be able to read between the words as well as any man. Ned let her finish. He took the letter and broke the stick of wax with the direwolf on it and dripped a pool upon the fold and stamped it. "When the guards change at midnight," he said, "Kedge will have letters to take from the bridge to the kitchen postern. He will add yours to the others." "Thank you," Sansa whispered. Tears lay in her eyes and did not fall. She looked at the seal as if it had made something true that had been only words a moment before. Ned lay awake long after his daughters slept. The night pressed on the walls with a soft persistence like a sea that means to come in but is polite for the moment because the tide is not yet at the proper hour. He rose at last and went to the window. Across the yard, a lantern moved along the bridge with the slow, careful pace of a man who takes his own life seriously. Down beyond the walls, a dull roar like a sleeping beast came and went as the city breathed in its sleep. Ned leaned his forehead against the cool stone and stayed there until his mind's noise receded enough he could hear his own judgment again. At dawn, he sent Barristan out with 2 good men and letters bound to his belt. One for Hoster Tully, one for Roose Bolton at the Dreadfort, one for Lord Manderley at White Harbor, one for Howland Reed, another for a dozen smaller lords whose names had become threads he must not let slip while weaving. Barristan took them gravely as a man might accept the souls of children to carry across a river. "I will return," he said. "You will need me." "I will," Ned said. "Cost something to say so." He paid it. The city woke restless. Word had run still and far that the Queen and her cubs lay within Maegor's holdfast, that a northern wolf had put himself in a southern pen and dared the lions to bite through steel, that the High Septon had read a dead man's letter and called it holy. Men who had scoffed at law muttered about it now. Women who had never said the word protector in their lives tried it on their tongues in kitchens and liked the feel of it. The watch stood taller, just a finger's breadth, and some of them shaved their cheeks for the first time in a fortnight, as if metal upon flesh might make them more official. Gold changed hands as often as ever, perhaps a little faster. It always does when men prepare for the morrow. 3 hours past sunrise, a disturbance ran along the spine of the Red, Keep like a cat, and came to ground at the holdfast gate in a tangle of whispers. A quarrel had broken out among the kitchen boys over a cockfighting debt. A knife had been drawn. No blood had been shed. The knife itself had been curious. A woman's bodkin. Someone laughed and someone else stopped him with a hand on his throat and told him to keep his teeth to himself if he liked them. Kedge brought the tidings to Ned with a face that tried to be merely dutiful and could not quite avoid carrying some of the knowledge that threatened to make it heavy. "One of the Queen's women has lost a bodkin," he said, "or had it stolen. The boy says he found it near the buttery stairs." "And where is the woman who lost it?" Ned asked. "She weeps and tears her hair," Kedge said, "or pretends to. Ser Loras thinks she weeps too loudly. Lord Parman says all women weep too loudly." "Lord Parman has never tried not to weep," Ned said curtly. "Search the buttery. Search the stairs. Search the drains. Find me anyone who walked there at the hour the knife was found. Speak to the kitchen master. Find out whose coin is lighter today by the amount of a wager on cocks. Tell Tomard he will change the watch at the Queen's door place by place, not in threes." Kedge's mouth tightened with the satisfaction of a man whose lord had asked him to do things he understood. "Aye, my lord." He went swiftly. Varys came slowly. He always did when a thing required speed. "We have our first pin," he murmured. "My lady the Queen did not prick herself with it. Someone else did." "Do not say my lady the Queen," Ned snapped, and then frowned at himself for wasting disdain where there was too little breath to feed them both. "Find me the woman. Find me who handed her the pin." Varys looked pleased and pained. "You give me so little and ask so much," he sighed. "I shall be grateful for the exercise." He lingered. "Will you do it today?" he asked in the tone of a man discussing an opera's third act. "Tell the realm which golden child is not the king's?" "Tomorrow," Ned said. "Courage and patience." Varys breathed and left, light as the breath itself. Cersei knew something had been found. She did not ask what. Asking acknowledges that a man has something you need. She did not look toward the buttery or count her women. She sat at a small table with Marcella and wrote a letter to no one at all in a hand only she could read, and then burned it over a dish of orange peel so that the room smelled sweet. Joffrey sulked magnificently. Tommen bullied a kitten and then apologized to it and then wept and then fed it cream. Sandor watched everything and made note of the man who brought the cream. Men who move cream around a fortress should be watched. That night, when the stars made a thin frost upon the sky and the heat of the day grudged itself into corners, Ned summoned the High Septon to the Tower of the Hand. The old man came with his chain borne by a boy whose eyes wandered and a second boy whose eyes did not wander at all. He sat in a chair that had been made for smaller men and filled it. His breath smelt of fennel and age. "My son," he intoned. "My son." "I am not your son," Ned said. He was not unkind. He could have been. He did not like to waste the limited supply of unkindness a man can use in truth. "Tomorrow you will come to the Great Hall at noon." "I shall," the High Septon said. "And sing." "You will witness," Ned said. "You will seal the truth with your ring." The old man blinked and was cunning for 3 heartbeats. "Whose truth?" he asked then, and the cunning withdrew as if it had been a fish that had poked its head up to see if there were flies and found the water too clear. "The king's truth," Ned answered. The High Septon picked at a spot on his vast robe where someone had spilled gravy 3 feasts past. "Truths are heavy things," he said. "We must let the gods lift them. Men's backs are weak." "Lift it," Ned said. In the hour before dawn, Sansa's letter went out with 6 others, and the guard's breath hung in a white cloud when the night wind turned left. In the hour after dawn, Davos's small boat put out from the shadow of a quay with no look behind it and no sound, and the fishermen who saw it from under their hats did not see it. For a man who looks and does not see is safer than a man who sees and remembers. In the 2nd hour, a woman's wail rose in Maegor's holdfast and died in 3 notes as if a hand had been put softly over the mouth it came from. In the 3rd hour, Janos Slint's thick laugh boomed out in his hall, though no jest had been spoken. At noon, the great hall filled like a lung. Lords came, and those who wore silk let it whisper. Those who wore mail let it speak more frankly. The High Septon's incense floated over the room, forgiving everything and forgetting nothing. Renly stood at Ned's left. Ser Barristan's absence was a gap men could feel without seeing. Ser Mandon and Ser Boros and Ser Meryn took their usual places as if nothing in the world could shift them except a hand on a chessboard. Varys smoothed his sleeves. Littlefinger smiled benignly at no one and everyone. Cersei did not come. Ned had not asked her. He had not asked her children. He stood where he had stood the day before and set his hand upon the table before him and could feel his heart through the wood. The High Septon raised his fat hands and put them down again in prudent silence when Ned's look caught him. Ned breathed in. The hour that Cersei had named had come, and it was his to spend. He spoke the names of kings and the names of their sons. He spoke of hair and blood and the way a book had been written to make sense of such things, not to make mischief. He spoke of Robert's line and Stannis's place within it. He spoke of Renly's place, which was not where some men wanted to place it. He did not say any man's mother's name. He did not say that word. He did not need to. The air said it for him because men already held it like a sweet or a filth in their mouths and were merely waiting to be told whether to spit or swallow. He held the book up. It had been Pycelle's once and was the realm's now. He read a passage until the words themselves seemed to steady around him like friends who have walked a long way with you and do not require you to pretend not to be tired. He let the book down gently. He drew breath. "The boy Joffrey is not the late king's son," he said, and the word not went out like a pebble thrown into water and set ring upon ring upon ring. "Nor is Tommen, nor is Myrcella. A true king will be crowned, as the law requires." The hall's breath changed. That was all. It was always all. Men turned their heads. Women's hands touched their throats. Some listen for what they always wanted to hear and discover it has at last been said. Some listen for what they fear and discover they were right to fear it. The High Septon's face moved and did not move. He put his ring upon the table beside the book and slid it forward 1/2 inch and stopped. as if the ring had chosen to do that much and would not do more until it had negotiated with its conscience. Renly did not move. He held himself the way a man holds his arm while a physician pours wine over a wound, unflinching out of dignity more than courage. Littlefinger's lashes lowered. Varys's lips parted in admiration for the courage of men who let fire into a room, even with water at hand. Janos Slynt stood very still. In Maegor's holdfast, Cersei heard the roar that followed. She lifted her head as if the noise were assent. She did not ask the guard at her door what had been said. She knew. She had always known that someday a man would stand before other men and say it, and she had prepared for that day, not by changing the truth, which she could not, but by making certain it would be very dear to buy. "Shall we weep?" she asked Myrcella lightly. "For what?" Myrcella asked, and Cersei's eyes pricked because her daughter's question had been innocent and deadly both. "For a song that was sung so loudly the singer could not hear the sound of his own feet upon the stair," Cersei said.
No.
"We will not weep. We will write letters." She took quill and paper and wrote. She wrote to her father, and she wrote to no one, and she wrote to the city itself in the language that Coin understands. She wrote a single line that any man might have read and said it was nothing, and she put that line into a letter that would go by night to a sept where women with poor husbands prayed for bread. In the hall, when the roar had gone out through doors and windows, when it had run down steps and into kitchens and into the guardrooms and along the hallways the way a fox runs along hedges, seeking holes, Ned raised his hand. He had thought his hand would shake. It did not. He said Stannis's name. He said it twice. He let the law sit down where it had been meant to sit all along. He did not look for Renly's flinch. He did not look at Littlefinger's harmless smile. He did not look at Varys's eyes. He looked at the book and the ring and the place where men's oaths lay like heat upon the air. When it ended, he knew that nothing ended. That was the worst of it, and also the only comfort a man could reasonably expect. He stepped down. The High Septon lifted his ring and put it back on his finger and kissed it as if that might make men forget he had taken it off. Janos Slynt came forward with a bow so ornate it might have been meant to mimic piety. "My Lord Protector," he said with careful emphasis, "the watch is yours. What will you cost?" Ned asked him, so quietly that only Slynt could hear. Slynt's eyes flickered in a way he could not control. "I am the king's man," he said, and smiled as if he had made a jest they could both enjoy. Kedge stood behind him with his mouth a stubborn line. Ned put his hand upon the man's shoulder as he passed. "Keep your men steady," he said. "I keep my men," Kedge said, "as long as they are mine to keep." That afternoon the city ran like water that has met a stone. It divided and joined again, bubbled in places, smoothed in others, made new eddies. In Flea Bottom, a singer who had made coin for a week inventing ribald verses about the Queen's hair found that the men who had laughed yesterday were sober and uncertain today and wanted hymns. He changed tunes. In the Street of Sisters, a man who sold needles wrapped 3 bodkins cleverly in a child's shirt and hid them at the bottom of a basket and took them toward the Red Keep with a story about a sister's child who had pricked her thumb. The guard at the postern took his story and his bodkins as if both were property of the realm and sent him back down the hill with a cuff for the lie and a coin for the child, and told himself that he had done justice thereby. At sunset, Tywin Lannister's rider reached the city with the dust of the King's Road in his beard and a letter sealed with a lion's head in his hand. He did not ride into the Red Keep. He rode to the house of a man who sold glass. From there, the letter went by soft hand through a door that had not existed until this afternoon. Came to Cersei's hand at midnight. The words were few and meant to be heavy. Endure. Learn who has keys. Send names. Teach the fools to fear the dark as well as the day. If they insult our blood in public, make them pay for it in private coin. It was enough. In the second night watch, Kedge stopped a man near the buttery who had a maid's face and a man's shoulders. Kedge had been a man with a maid once and knew the difference. He said, "Good evening, sweetling," and the man lifted his knife, and that was that. They dragged him into the light and saw he had the rat-catcher's cords at his belt and a coin with a lion upon it in his mouth, where he had tucked it to make it easier to swear later that he had no coin from a Lannister if anyone cut his purse. Kedge spat and kicked the coin free, and it rolled, ringing, and struck the jam and fell still, and a maid who had been hired yesterday to sweep in the mornings could not help but look at it. Kedge put his boot upon the coin without looking at the maid and said to the man with the knife in his shoulder, "Who told you there would be a rat here to catch?" The man smiled, and blood ran between his teeth, and said nothing. Before dawn, Renly came to Ned. He looked very young in the half-light, the way men who are handsome and certain look young without wanting to when the edges of their performances are not yet on. "We cannot hold the city long," he said without preface. "Not against my father by law when he comes with coin. Not against the Lannisters' way with men who will smile and be bought and tell themselves stories about living to spend the money." "I know," Ned said. "Ride with me," Renly said suddenly, leaning in as if confiding in a lover. "We will go to the Stormlands. I will call my banners. You will call yours, if the North will come for you as it should. We will make a kingdom between us and return with it in iron and demand Stannis sit and not stand. We will make a king with more than a book and a fat priest's ring." "No," Ned said, not because the plan was not clever or appealing to a kind of man, but because the law was a rope he would not let go of even to save himself. "You are not the lawful king." Renly's mouth compressed. "I am the king men would love," he said. "You are a boy men love," Ned returned. "The kingdom is full of boys men love. They become men, and then what?" He shook his head. "I will not run. I will not play at crowns because they are pretty." Renly held silent a heartbeat too long. He looked past Ned to the window and the patch of paling sky and then back. "You will die," he said very softly. "Men like you always do. You choose it." He let out a breath that might have been meant for pity and could not find purchase on his tongue. "Then I will go," he said. "Tonight, before your Stannis' pale girl with her red eyes comes in with fire and sets us all counting our sins." He straightened. "I will take Loras. I will take any man who prefers a green field and a new son to your noble death." Ned did not move to stop him. He had no right to. He had no power. "Go," he said. "If you mean to be loved, do not be here tomorrow." Renly's face altered at that, and it hurt him to see. But he had chosen. They both had. Renly left the Red Keep before the city's earliest bakers had brought their first loaves to the window and set them upon damp cloth. Loras went with him in a cloak with its hood up, which could not keep men from recognizing the way he walked. 10 men slipped out behind them like thoughts a man does not admit to himself yet acts upon anyway. The city did not notice. The city is very good at not noticing men who desire not to be noticed. Varys Nodic. Ed, because he notices men's absences as other men notice a change in weather. He let the news sit upon his tongue and waited to see how it would change its taste. At noon, Stannis' sails were seen at the mouth of Blackwater Bay. Not so many as Tyrell might have brought, not so few as a man could laugh at. The ships came like honest men, square in their lines, without show. Men on the city's walls counted. Men in the city counted how much bread they had and how long it would last with a fleet at anchor outside the walls. In the throne room, the book and the ring lay where Ned had left them, and he sat with a quill in his hand to write 3 lines to a man he did not love and respected more than most men he had ever met. "Come to the Red Keep by the King's Gate under Parley. Bring 10 men. I will bring 10 men. We will speak beneath the skulls." The raven that bore that message took the breeze and banked and skimmed and rose. On Dragonstone's nearest galley, a man with a fresh scar at his jaw took the bird with practiced hands and bound the message to a faster bird and sent it aloft again. Not an hour later, under a sky turned new coin by the lowering sun, another bird came to the Red Keep with a piece of paper that had not allowed its edges to bend. "I will come. Send no archers to the roofs. If 1 arrow falls, I will make your river burn." Ned read it and, very briefly, smiled. It was the kind of letter a man like Stannis sent. It did its work. He went to Maegor's Holdfast himself, because he would not have Cersei told what he meant to do by a lesser mouth. She received him standing. She wore red and gold, the Lannister colors that fit her like blood and sunlight both. Myrcella stood beside her with her hands folded. a doll at her feet that she had not picked up since last night. Tommen held a kitten to his breast with his eyes shut as if the act made him strong. Joffrey leaned against the wall and scowled and thought himself iron. "Stannis comes," Ned said. "How like him," Cersei said. "Does he bring his god?" "He brings himself," Ned said. "That is enough." "Too much," she said. With that little flicker of the mouth that was the only memory of a girl's laugh she allowed herself in a month. "What will you do? Throw law at him like stones?" "He will put them in a pile and make himself a house with them. I will give him the throne he is owed," Ned said. "And what do I get?" Cersei asked. "I have grown used to speaking in the first-person plural. I do not much like the singular. Fits poorly. What is the queen to be given when she is no queen?" "Safety," Ned said. "For you. For your children." "Safety," she repeated, tasting the word. The sort of safety a man gives a mare, that she might yet be bred again. She looked at her daughter. The look passed over Myrcella like a hand touching hair. "You do not strike me as a man who keeps women for breeding stock, Lord Stark. That would be a kindness. I would like to know for once what it feels like to be wrong about a man." "You will see," Ned said. "Shall I?" She lifted her chin. "Your Stannis will burn our bed linens for the sin he smells in them. He will make a law against the color of my hair if it pleases him. He will prune the realm until it looks as it did when he was 12 and had just discovered that men fear him when he does not smile. He will not forgive." Her eyes went bright for a moment, and then clear and hard again. "That is the only thing I ask you, spare the children," she said. "Do not teach them Stannis's unforgiveness. If you must give them a king to fear, give them also a morning to wake to that is not only lists of rules." She laughed then, softly and cruelly at herself. "Listen to me," she said. "A lioness bargaining for her cubs with a man who keeps lambs in a pen and tells them stories of wolves. Go, Lord Stark. Play your honest game. I will play mine." He left her in the cage he had made and felt as if he were walking away from a forge. The heat stayed in his skin and made his blood quick. Outside, the air tasted of sea and iron. The skulls in the throne room waited with the patience only dead fire can afford. They met beneath the dragons. Stannis came with 10 men, as promised. Most in plain iron, 2 with the new scarlet of a queen's religion somewhere on a sleeve or a collar, 1 with a face Ned liked the moment he saw it, Davos, who stood with his cap in his hands and counted exits without appearing to count them. Stannis himself wore black like a man who thinks color an offense except when a flag must be clean against a sky. He had shaved. It made his face look even more like a blade. He looked at the skulls once and then not again, as if he had made his mind up about them the instant he saw them and found they were exactly what he had always thought. The remains of monsters men had meant to ride and had in the end killed to keep from being eaten. Ned came with 10. Ser Barristan had not yet returned. He brought instead Desmond, Tommard, Lord Renly, who had insisted through clenched teeth and then looked as if he might yet think of a way to walk backward into his own place in it. Loras Tyrell, 2 northern men whose names no one in the room but Ned knew and who looked at Stannis as men look at winter come before the harvest is in, and Varys and Littlefinger because it would be worse to have them absent. Varys rustled. Littlefinger smiled. They took their places. The space between them lay very small and very wide at once. "Lord Stark," Stannis said. He gave no bow, not because he meant to insult, but because he held a precise balance in his head and would not tilt it to satisfy anyone's appetite for grace. "You have done a thing that needed doing. I have done a thing that will cost," Ned said. "I hope to pay it without paying out blood." "You will pay it in blood," Stannis said, as if he were telling a man the hour of his own next breath. "The only question is whose." "That is not the only question," Ned replied. "What do you mean to do with her?" He did not look at the Queen's tower. He kept his eyes upon Stannis's dark ones. "And with her children." Stannis's jaw tightened and loosened once. "The realm does not benefit by killing a woman and her cubs," he said. "We are not Aerys Targaryen. We do not put a child and his sister to the sword for song. We set their mother aside. We take her honor where it was given to her by a husband's name. We keep them safe. We put her where she cannot harm the law or herself. We find her a house with walls." He breathed out. "We will call what we have to call by its name. We will do it once. We will not make a show of it more than that." "Dragonstone has walls," Renly said suddenly, with a poisoned sweetness. "It would be a pretty place for a lioness." Stannis did not even turn his head. "You will not teach me to be a lord," he said. "I learned that from a man who could command without opening his mouth." He looked back at Ned. "What I will not do," he added, "is let her speak poison when I am not there to call it by its true name." "She will always speak," Varys said gently. "Then I will always have men and law," Stannis replied. "If I cannot have those, I will have fire." "Your Grace," Littlefinger murmured smoothly, and saw the way Stannis's face altered at the title, not with pleasure but with a sort of weary acceptance, as if he were a man who had been given a heavy coat and knew he would have to wear it in summer as well as winter. "Your Grace," Peter said again, "I have friends who will sell you their bread very cheaply if you promise to pay dearly later. The city must be fed. The law eats less than men, but it eats." Stannis regarded him like a beetle he might crush, but did not because it had not yet bitten him. "You will keep your accounts true," he said. Littlefinger bowed. "My truth is balances," he said sweetly. Ned looked from one man to the other. To stand in the hall between them was like standing between two kinds of iron. One forged and straight and brittle, the other flexible and cunning and slippery and strong. He was tired. He found that he was glad to be tired, because it made the temptation to admire either kind of iron less. "We will make the thing formal," he said. "The High Septon will anoint you. The lords in the city will bend. The gold cloaks will keep the gate. We will have the queen sent." Stannis lifted a hand. "Not yet," he said. "If Tywin Lannister thinks his grandchildren are upon a ship, he will put all his metal upon the river and burn half the city to get them back. Let him think they are safe behind the walls he trusts to keep him from his enemies." He considered Ned a moment longer. "You have done honorably," he said finally. "I will remember it." "You will keep faith," Ned returned. "I will do what the law requires," Stannis said, and Ned allowed himself to accept that as Stannis's way of saying yes. They signed no paper. They needed none. They agreed upon signals for ships at anchor, and on the hour the High Septon would be fetched. They agreed upon which archers would stand upon which roofs, and which men would not be allowed within the sept for the crowning. They did not agree on Renly. Renly smiled and bowed and promised to remain, and both of them knew that a promise from Renly was a pretty thing that could be enjoyed and then put aside. Stannis did not expend breath on it. Ned did not, because there was no breath to expend. When it was done, Stannis turned to go. He did not waste his men's feet. Davos lingered a moment. He looked from one man to the other the way a man looks at two stones that both must be used to make a hearth. "If you die," he said to Ned without preface, "your girls will need a man to take them to sea." His mouth quirked. "I am not much for castles. I can take them to White Harbor quicker than Lord Manderley's fattest cog, and with less fuss." "If you die," he repeated, as if the words needed two nails to hold them. "I hope you will not." "I hope so too," Ned said, feeling the absurd kindness pierce him like a thorn, and held out his hand. Davos took it. His palm was scarred and honest. After they left, Varys sighed like a man who has admired a piece of carpentry and finds a flaw he can enjoy. "So proper," he breathed. "Two men who let the shape of things do their speaking for them. It is a pity the city speaks in coin and gossip. Gossip can sing hymns when a choir is paid," Littlefinger observed. "I will see what purses sing best." "Do," Ned said. That night, the city lay like a loaded cart at the top of a long slope. It would take only a hand upon it, a small shove, to send it where it would go. Men slept. Men lay awake and stared at the beams. Men prayed. Women laid knives under pillows and did not tell their husbands. The watch walked and dozed and woke themselves with an oath against their own weariness. In Maegor's Holdfast, a mouse frightened a lady-in-waiting so badly she nearly ran through the inner door. Tomard put a hand upon her shoulder and told her a story about a mouse he had known in Winterfell that had been brave as a dog. She calmed without knowing why. In the godswood, the southern trees breathed rosemary and orange leaf, and not a single god turned a face. Sometime in the black hour before dawn, Kedge, who had made a habit of standing by the bridge for a quarter hour after his watch ended just to hear the water and the rasp of his own breath, saw a shadow cross a shadow and thought he knew whose feet it was. He took 3 steps and put his hand on the man's arm. The man flinched hard. Kedge's fingers closed like a trap. It was the boy with the boil by his ear, Aller Deem's friend. "Where are you going?" Kedge asked pleasantly, as if he meant to offer to accompany him. The man stammered something about the privy. Kedge smiled. "The closest one is the other way," he said. The man went the other way. Kedge waited. He listened to the water. He heard a rat drop from one rung to another of the ladder down to the stream with a faint wet sound like a sigh. At dawn, the High Septon's attendants came with basins and oils and clean cloth. The old man had slept badly and eaten too well. He looked at himself in a polished silver and told the boy who held it that he looked like a mountain. "Mountains do not move easily," the boy said bravely, and the old man liked that and nodded and felt strong for half a breath. Ned broke his fast with bread and cheese and a cup of small beer. It steadied his stomach. He put on the same clothes he had worn the day before, because a man who changes his coat to speak the same truth twice is a man who likes coats too much. He buckled his sword and wished he could leave it in his chamber. But men in this city listen hard when a man with a sword speaks and then forget what he said if he does not carry the weight of it a while after. He went to see Sansa and Arya. Sansa had slept poorly and tried to hide it with water upon her face and a ribbon through her hair and a smile that had too much work in it. Arya slept with her mouth open, her wooden sword across her chest. Her hair sprung loose from its thong like a bramble bush. He stood and watched them both until he had the strength to go. He made 2 promises before the hour bells began to strike for noon. He promised Sandor Clegane the barrel of oysters. He promised himself that if he had to choose between Law and his daughters, he would choose his daughters without lies. It was a terrible promise to make. It made the law no less true. It made him no less a man. When the bells began, the city turned its face toward the great September of Baelor. The street before it filled. The steps became a stone river that men climbed with heads bowed and women ascended with their skirts lifted just high enough to keep the fabric from the grime. The sun shone upon the 7 crystal towers, making rainbows like tricks. Stannis came from the river, plain and punctual. Ned came from the keep, measured and grave. Between them lay a city that would decide, in a way cities decide, with bread and whispers and whether men at corners shake their heads or nod. They reached the foot of the steps together without touching. Barristan, returned and tired from a ride that would have given a younger man pride, stepped up to Ned's side and did not speak. The High Septon spread his hands. The wind lifted the hem of his robe. Somewhere a gull screamed like a soul and shut up. 7 who are one. The High Septon began, and then the world's sound changed. It was not a horn. It was not a cry. It was the sound fire makes before it is aflame. Men on the steps turned. Men on the walls shouted. On the river, a line of color ran across the Blackwater's skin like oil and then bloomed in little flowers whose petals were smoke. Stannis's ships swung in their moorings. Oars lifted like legs pulled from a hot floor. On the far tower of the Red Keep, a flag snapped and then burned from the bottom up with a blue that was not a true fire's blue. Men cried gods and mothers. Ned's hand went to his sword. He did not draw. He looked toward the holdfast. Cersei stood upon her screen. She looked toward the sept and then toward the river. Her mouth made a small line. She reached down and took Tommen's hand and put it into Myrcella's. She did it as you do when you are very tired and mean to go on. Joffrey tore himself free from a woman who had tried to hold him and went to the window and laughed when he saw the color on the water because he was young and because he loved the world most when it reflected only him. In the great September, the High Septon turned his rings nervously. Littlefinger looked at the river and then at the hats. Varys, for the first time in 2 days, looked surprised, and it did not become him. Stannis narrowed his eyes. calculating distances a man can calculate with a glance when he has stared at a shore long enough to know exactly how far a fire can run upon a tide. "It will not burn the city," he said. "Not yet." He looked at Ned. "Tywin Lannister sends gifts. He will send men next." He lifted his chin toward the steps. "Shall we do it now, or shall we go back to our cages and wait for him to knock on the door?" Ned looked at the faces on the steps and at the small rainbow the sun had made upon the polished stone of the 7th step, and at the men on the wall with their mouths open and their bows in their hands not yet drawn. He looked at the book in the High Septon's shaking hands. He looked at Stannis's quiet, ferocious face. He looked, in his mind, at Catelyn holding Bran before a winter window, and Bran's hair like brown feathers stuck to his damp forehead, and at Arya with her mouth full of stolen honey cake, and at Sansa's first careful stitches. "We will do it now," he said, and heard in his own voice the sound of a man choosing which blade to place his hand upon first. They climbed. The crowd parted and pressed. The oaths were spoken and the oil was poured and the crown of plain iron, Aegon's, not Robert's antlered piece, was set upon a head that had never wanted a crown and wore it like a punishment. Voices rose, and some were false and some were true. Men made the sign for protection upon their chests. Women held up children who cried for something they did not understand. The 7 crystals flashed. The river burned blue in the distance and then went black where oars beat it flat. The bells made their sound, and for once the sound did not drown out men's hearts. It beat with them and returned their courage. When it was done, the city was not different, and everything was. The rest was only blood and bread and coin. That was what Ned told himself when the first stone flew from the edge of the square and struck a man in a hat and broke his cheekbone and he fell without a cry. That was what he told himself when Janos Slynt smiled too much at Renly's empty place and too little at Kedge's steady eyes. That was what he told himself when Cersei's letter went out by a hand too small to be suspected and reached a sept where women learned to sing a new song about a wolf who ate children and called it law. That was what he told himself when word came from the river that a small boat had been found burned to char, and a fisherman with his hair singed to stubble swore he had seen the water catch fire like oil and then go dead as if gods had drunk the flame. But the rest was also men and women, and the way they do not become what other men call them just because a word is shouted loud enough. The rest was Kedge stopping a man with a basket and finding 3 bodkins and 3 loaves and letting him go with the loaves and not the bodkins. The rest was Sansa showing Myrcella how to make a certain kind of knot with ribbon, through a screen with a septa watching, with no word spoken that could not be repeated in a hall. The rest was Arya putting her small feet exactly where Syrio told her and feeling the beat of the city come up through the stone and into her bones and learning to balance upon it. In the night after the crowning, a boy with a boil by his ear did not return to the barracks. In the morning, a coin with a lion's head lay at the bottom of a drain, filthy and perfect, where no man would find it unless he were the kind of man who finds coins in drains because he thinks like water. On the 3rd day, a letter came from Riverrun with 4 blotches where a man's hand had shaken and spilled ink. Edmure bled. The lines said little else and too much. Ned sent more men. He had so few to send. On the 5th day, Renly's green banner was seen beyond the walls riding south, then east, then gone. On the 7th day, Stannis signed a writ ordering Ser Janos Slynt to present himself at the Red Keep for accountings of bread and stee. On the 8th day, Janos went to Littlefinger at dusk and came out at full dark with a purse and a story that had cost less than either. On the 9th, Cersei asked for a book. When the guard brought it, she smiled and thanked him and asked his name, and the guard, who had a mother who liked to hear her son's name upon a lady's lips, told it to her as if it were a secret. She said his mother must be proud. He went out with a weight in his chest that had nothing to do with disloyalty and everything to do with being seen in a city where most men are only looked at to be counted. On the 10th day, a storm came in off the sea that left salt in every crack. On the 11th, the city woke to a quiet only men who have lived too long in noise can appreciate. No bells. On the 12th, Stannis went to the small dock beneath the castle and looked at the river and said nothing. Davos stood beside him and also said nothing. Sometimes a man preserves himself by not wasting words before they are needed. On the 13th night, the High Septon died in his sleep, very conveniently, and in the morning the holy men who had been waiting all their lives for an excuse to split into factions did so with decorum. Varys smelt of lavender when he brought the news. "The gods are merciful," he said without irony. Ned did not ask him whether he had eased the old man along. There were only so many doors a man could open in 1 week without losing track of what lay behind them. On the 14th day, a boy from the kitchens ran into the yard before Maegor's holdfast and shouted that a lion had been seen in the river. Men laughed and cuffed him and told him no. In the afternoon, a fisher brought up a wet piece of velvet from near the base of the tower with gold thread worked through it in the shape of an ear. Cersei stared at it when they showed her. She said it was ugly and not hers. Her mouth smiled. Her eyes did not. That night, she pressed Myrcella's hand hard enough to leave little moon-shaped marks and rinsed the marks with rosewater and told her daughter it had been a game. Myrcella looked at her and said nothing and did not cry. On the 15th morning, men woke and found that nothing had cracked during the night except a window pane in the Tower of the Hand. The day went on. A woman bore a son. A thief had his hand taken. Pot broke. Pie was overbaked. A line of ants discovered sugar in the pantry of a lord who had not known he had such hunger in his house. The river did not burn. The bells did not ring. In the hall, the book and the ring lay where Ned had left them. He picked the book up and replaced it upon a shelf and put the ring into a coffer. He went to his daughters. He went to the queen. He went to the wall and looked south and saw only heat's shimmer and the thought of men. A hawk rode a circle high over the Red Keep that day, too wide for men below to understand that it was one circle and not 4 different hawks. It hung there a long time, not hunting, only making a shape in the air visible only to itself. When it finally cut its wing and slid away, the city did not notice. The city seldom does when small, perfect things depart. And somewhere out upon the King's Road, where the white dust rose and lay down again and men's talk could be heard by birds if birds cared, a boy with a boil by his ear moved away from a fire and told the man who paid him that the wolf had put iron around the queen's den. The man nodded and told him he would not be needed again. The boy's eyes widened. He did not even have time to feel the knife. The man wiped the blade on his own sleeve and threw it into a ditch and rode on. He did not look back. He did not need to. Men like him never do. Far to the north, in Winterfell's quiet, where ravens came and went as if letters were no heavier than snowflakes, Robb Stark held his father's latest and read it 3 times and then handed it to Maester Luwin and went to the Godswood to tell the Heart Tree he was going to be a man in the way men become men without wanting to be. The leaves did not answer. They never do. They listened. That was enough. In Riverrun, Bryn Den Tully laughed so hard at a single line of Stannis's letter that he began to cough, and Catelyn thumped his back with such ferocity that Hoster, far gone, might have been stirred by the sound of it in his fog. "He writes like a jailer giving out rules," Bryn Den said when he could speak. "It is almost refreshing. I have had enough of pretty liars this month to last me to my grave." He looked at Catelyn. She had not laughed. She said the name Eddard without saying it, and Bryn Den heard it all the same and sent a man in gray to watch for ravens with a face that said not to tell the man there would be none today. "Your Ned plays with honest pieces," Bryn Den said softer. "It is a rare game, can be won, can also be lost more cleanly than others. That is something." "You think we will have to choose," Catelyn said. "We always have to choose," he said. "Today we know it." In the Red Keep, Ned did not sleep. On the 16th dawn, before the sun had got up the courage to show its face above the roofs, he went to the window. The city lay like an old dog that had eaten to contentment and dared not sleep for fear someone would kick it. He set his hand upon the stone and leaned. He felt the weight of the walls move through his bones. He thought of the law. He thought of the girl who had asked him to let her write. He thought of the boy with a cat. He thought of a woman who had counted pins and names and waited with teeth and patience both. He thought, "We will not break today." The day began. The city took it. And in Maegor's holdfast, Cersei Lannister rose and put on a gown the color of smoke, and turned her face toward the smoldering city and smiled. Not with delight, with knowledge. Then she set her hand upon Myrcella's hair and smoothed it and kissed the child's temple, and turned to Joffrey and told him a story about a prince who learned that a cage is a thing made of words before it is made of bars. And to Tommen she gave a piece of sugared orange, and to herself she said the line she had written 3 nights before, out loud, to taste it. The line asked for a singer. The city would find her one. It always did. The hawk did not return. A cloud moved across the sun and took half the day into shadow, and men looked up uneasily, and then went about their work with the knowledge of shadow in their spines. The Blackwater sucked at its banks like a tired mouth. Davos bought oysters. Stannis counted loaves. Renly counted smiles and inns and set his face toward Highgarden. Varys listened. Littlefinger added a column and then another and did not once look out the window as if a man could elsewise fall. Sandor split a seed with a knife point and flicked half of it away and ate the other half as if eating half of something were a point of honor when everything else in a day must be eaten whole. Somewhere at the city's edge, a man hammered a shoe on a horse and told a boy who watched that a shoe must be nailed in all 4 corners or not at all. The boy nodded as if a mystery had been explained. In the Tower of the Hand, Ned Stark took up his quill and wrote 2 letters, one to a man who might yet become a friend-in-law, and one to a woman who had been a friend before law, before snow, before all of it. He sealed them without showing his face crack. He gave them to a boy who ran as if the letters were teaching his feet speed. He stood a moment longer and then went to the door, because choices are not made sitting. He did not know whether the end lay close or far. He knew only that the next step lay on stone, and he had always been a man to put his foot where it ought to be and let the world take care of itself where it could, and stop it when it could not. He went out. The door closed. The city breathed. The day advanced, reluctant and inexorable both, and the tale did not end. It only found a new line to follow, in a script no man had written, on paper too thin to hold it for long. The city woke into a pale, breath-held light and found itself rearranged by words spoken the day before. Not the stones, not the angles of its alleys, not the lines of its roofs against the brightening sky, but the tiny calibrations by which men judged who stood where and who stood behind whom when the rain came. A hawker set his tray on a sill and whispered, "Your Grace," where he had said, "My lord," yesterday. A groom in the yard bowed to the white cloak first and the gold second. A kitchen maid let herself take 2 onions for a stew that would feed 6 and not 5 because the gods had been named and the letter read and men felt they were watching. That is what a city is. A nervous animal, testing its weight on a new leg and deciding not to limp. Ned rose before the second bell. Sleep had moved over him in ragged strips. He had taken what it offered and given it back without complaint when it left. The water in the ewer had kept the nights cool as if it had hidden in the clay. He washed, tied back his hair, belted on his sword as a farmer ties on his apron. The steel's weight eased his mind. It made his arm a fact. In the council chamber, Stannis Baratheon stood where kings stand and did not move from that place even when the draft from the high windows found the back of his neck and made the small hairs their stand. He had never liked winds. They bring men words they have not asked for and take away warmth stored at cost. His black, unadorned doublet showed the shape of him without flattery. A man hammered into a certain thickness and no other. "You will remain hand," he said when Ned entered. No flourish, no preamble, as if he had been waiting with that sentence in his mouth and wanted it out. "I will have a master of ships who knows water with his hands and not only his books. I will have a master of coin who keeps his balances and not his friends." His gaze went to Littlefinger and stayed there the way a dog might look at a clever cat, aware, uninterested in the cat's opinion of itself. "You will keep your office," he said to Peter Baelish, and made the words as sharp as a dismissal. "If your sums lie, I will read them aloud in the September." Littlefinger's mouth smiled, but the smile did not decide what it wished to be. "Your Grace honors me," he murmured, and glanced sideways at Ned as if to say that the game pieces had not all been moved yet. "Davos Seaworth," Stannis went on, "is master of ships." Davos, standing with his cap wrung between his hands and his face weathered by 100 weathers that had not bothered to ask his leave to peel it, lifted his head and looked like a man a jest had just been made at and discovered it was true and honest both. "If his hand offends bookmen," Stannis added dryly, "they can look at his other fingers." No one laughed. It was not a line meant for laughter. Pycelle puffed his cheeks and rattled his chain in an attempt to make it seem louder than the king's voice. Varys touched his sleeves together lightly, the way a man does who has nothing to say and does not wish to be suspected of withholding anything. Ser Barristan returned an hour ago with dust still on his boots and a starved look of contentment on his tired face, stood apart and watched the way men breathed in the new order. Renly was not there. He had been not there since before dawn, and his not there-ness was a presence of its own, sleek and scented and perilous. "The law sits," Stannis said. "Let the city sit under it." He looked at Ned as if to say, "Now make them sit." They began with bread because men who have bread will allow other matters to be spoken of without looking at the door so often. Davos took the weight of that upon his shoulder without flinching. "There's grain at Duskendale if you pay the men who stand between grain and road," he said. "There's fish in the bay when the wind is not a jest at a sailor's expense. White Harbor will send loaves if Lord Manderley is given something to grease his conscience with. He has always had a conscience. It is shaped like a roast." He scratched at a salt-roughened scar as if this were another piece of navigation. "I can fetch enough to keep the city from gnawing its fingers." "Fetch," Stannis said. "Do not lecture me on wind." Davos lowered his eyes with the humility of a man who knows his king by weight and accepts it. I'll need coin." He did not look to Littlefinger. He looked to Ned. Ned nodded once. "You will have the coin. The Master of Coin's friends love their city when the city is full of men who can pay for their friends' bread." Littlefinger, smiling still, moved a small pile of tallies from one corner of the table to another. "The Master of Coin's friends love their profit," he said pleasantly. "What the city loves is to be told which king will pay for the bread today and which will pay tomorrow." He flicked one tally toward Davos with 2 fingers. "Bring us your loaves, Onion Knight. I will write numbers beside them that make them look like a feast." Pycelle dabbed at the sweat under his several chins. "And the alchemists?" he quavered. "They have been excited. Some mischief upon the river yesterday. Their guild sent a boy to tell me someone had said He blinked. His vocabulary stumbled upon honest words. "A trick upon the water. I told them to remain at their hearths. They do the city no good when excited." "Their fires burn green," Stannis said without looking at him. "Yesterday's stain was blue." Varys's lashes drifted slowly upward, languid as a cat sunning itself. "His Grace has an eye for colors," he murmured. "Halene the pyromancer waits in a hall with windows that do not open. He will be so relieved to tell us that no one has stolen any wildfire, and that his green flames are kept under lock and watch and prayers. It will make him happy to be useful." "Bring him," Ned said. "He will speak, and then he will go back to his prayers." When Varys bowed and drifted out, he added to Stannis, because the man respected the sound of a hammer on truth. "The blue fire on the river was pitch with copper salts or a sailor's trick with oil. The city saw a color and called it sorcery. We will make it common again by calling it what it is." "Name things," Stannis said. "They obey better when they know they are known." Halene came and wrung his fat hands in their stained gloves and declared that the Guild of Alchemists had not, would not, could not have loosed any of the wildfire casks beneath their vaults, that the substance given them by King Aerys was accounted for cup by cup, that the very idea of blue flames offended him as a student of true fire. "It is a showman's trick," he sniffed. "Resin dyed with woad, perhaps with a little vitriol to make it hiss. Pah! We do not hiss. We burn." He recognized Stannis then, later than his dignity could afford, and bent low. "Your Grace, keep your vaults closed," Stannis said. "If a drop leaks, I will set you to stirring your own vats and see how a true fire likes you." Halene paled, bowed again, and fled. Pycelle made a small distressed sound. Littlefinger watched the man go and arranged his face into a sympathetic fold. "Poor Halene," he murmured. "He has so little that anyone would pay to take." "Not true," Varys lilted from the door, in the tone of a man who has overheard enough poor jokes to want one good truth now and then. "He has fear which can always be borrowed." They sent the pyromancer away with a guard who had ears and not only a spear. They sent Davos to the river with a pouch of coin and a strip of Stannis's plain seal under wax and the weight of a city's hunger on his back. They sent messages to Manderley, to Tarth, to Duskendale's petty lords whose grandfathers had been great once and liked to be reminded in writing. They sent a quiet boy into the city's septs to count candles lit to a mother's prayer and learn which of the poor sisters had hands soft from coin. Varys chose the boy. He promised not to keep him. Ned spent his morning after that in work that could not be given to other men without losing the shape of it. The Weeper's Gate watch rotations, the stores of salted herring and the casks of cider that had gone off and must not be allowed to sicken men who would then sicken other men with their fear, the lists of names, always the lists of names, set beside the doors to Maegor's holdfast in a clerkly hand that made the loops too large and the stems too mean. He sat with Tomard and Desmond and Kedge and smelt the iron and sweat on them as they spoke, and put his finger upon the lines where names lay whose owners had mothers who had been given too much kindness by a lady behind a screen and too much coin by a man whose crest had a lion upon it. By midday, the holdfast felt his attention across stone. In the Queen's rooms, Cersei turned a page and did not look at it, and Myrcella sighed at a knot that would not pull sweetly through ribbon, and Joffrey paced and declared 10 times that he would never bow to a stag with a face like a nail, and Tommen put his hand, very gently, upon a kitten's belly and felt the purr in his palm and smiled as if he had thrust his hands into warm flour. They brought Sandor Clegane bread that had come still steaming from an oven, and he tore it and fed a part to Tommen without seeming to look at the boy. "Your cat will shit on your sleeve if you feed it cream," he said without rancor. "And then I'll make you wash your tunic with your own hands while your mother laughs." "My mother doesn't laugh," Tommen said, frowning because he tried to remember and could not find the sound. "She smiles." "Same thing, different teeth," Sandor said. Kedge came with a handful of questions and the memory of a coin heavy on his boot from last night. "We found a rat catcher with a dagger's idea of ambition," he told Tomard at the bridge, "and a coin in his mouth. Line work. He had friends. They will be missing him now. They will say he went to sea." Tomard scratched his beard and spat down into the stream in a neat arc that fell shy of the water. "There's always a sea in men's stories that swallows what they want gone. We keep our eye upon the land." "Keep both," Kedge said. "The sea came up the river once already this week." In the afternoon, when the air seemed to hold its breath before the sun decided whether to be merciful, a small procession made its slow way across the inner yard toward Maegor's holdfast. Asepta walked foremost, plump and pink-faced, her ring of office gleaming. Behind her came a pair of most devout whose hats could have served as platters and often had served as such at tables where they ate as humbly as men who served God, and as well as men who were noticed by queens. They had come, ostensibly, to deliver books to Princess Myrcella and speak a blessing for the queen's patience. They stood upon the stones before the barred gate and peered up at the slots in the wall, as if intimidated by the thought of where boiling oil had once been. Tomard met them with the weight of his body leaned slightly to one side, the way big men make their bulk seem less like a threat and more like a piece of furniture too large to move without 4 friends and a plan. "The Protector is grateful," he said. "He asks that you deliver the blessing through the gate." They were offended, as men are when their hats go unseen by those the hats would impress. "The Queen is a mother," one began, and Tomard said flatly, "So is half the city." It was not a kindness, and he did not smooth it. The Septa fussed and nodded and held up her hands. She spoke a blessing that was sincere enough to pass every god's test on a day when the gods were tired. A small boy, a novice, his hair still a little uneven from a recent zealot's cut, stood behind the hats and watched the guards' mouths and counted under his breath whenever a man said, "Your Grace," in Cersei's direction without her being present. Varys would have appreciated the boy had he been there to see him. He was not. He was in the cellars listening to pipes. When the robed ones shuffled away, the guard at the bridge who replaced Kedge for the hour was a man with a scar along his jaw, and a mother who had once washed linen in a river so cold in winter that her knuckles had been white for an hour after she rose. He watched the most devout go and rubbed his thumb along the pommel of his sword and wondered whether the gods knew a lion's coin by its taste. He did not have cause to discover it that afternoon. He was watched and he knew it, and there is nothing so chaste as a watched man. At dusk, Davos Seaworth came back to the Red Keep's river gate with 2 scabbed knuckles and a grin that had survived worse seas. He had 3 barges full of sacks with a smell like a clean stable, and 4 casks of salted cod, and 6 sailors who looked like they would steal their own bread if left alone with it. There was a purse lighter than he liked and a list of promises longer than any rope. "The Manderleys will send," he said to Ned, smearing the back of his hand across his lip as if to remove salt that was not there. "If your scribe writes prettier than mine, the Duskendale boys will hold onto theirs until they can swear they saw the gold go into their wives' hands. They are no fools. The gulls along the Cape told me a line of Blackwater boats went down with their oars in the air like beetles yesterday. Not wildfire. Tor." He spat. "You can paint a flame any color you like if you want a man to think it's a dragon. The real thing burns green and bites bone." "You have done well," Ned said. "I have done my work," Davos answered. "If there's a difference, I haven't found it yet. I'll go back on the turn of tide." "Sleep," Ned told him. "A man who has not slept will take a bribe by mistake." Davos smiled with half his mouth and did as he was told. When he slept like a cast-off rope in a coil by a door. Useful, ordinary, ready. On the 2nd day after the crowning, with grain moving along the river like a tired army, with bread baking in ovens men had thought cold, with the city's hunger pressed down but not banished, Stannis held court in the great hall. He did not sit the antlered throne. He would not wear Robert's gilded jest upon his head, and he would not sit in his brother's chair yet because there was still ash under it and the wood had a memory for weight. He stood on the step below and made the room stand with him. Men came to be judged. They brought quarrels about roofs and fishhooks, about a woman who had sold her neighbor's child a ribbon that had bled her neck when she wore it and stained her dress. Stannis listened with the patience of a man who has built a wall with his own hands and knows that it requires the same care 2/3 of the way up as at the beginning and the end. He ordered the ribbon seller to be whipped for selling false dye stuff and ordered the neighbor to be given another dress from a cloth merchant's bin, the cost to be taken from the ribbon woman's fine. He had the cloth merchant called in to ensure the dress was not the sort that would show the ribbon stain to begin with. If it was, he said, he would set the merchant to stand in the market and wear it all day. He was a tedious king that morning, and men left grateful for the tedium. Then Janos Slynt came, and the air altered not with a draught, but with the way dogs prick their ears before a storm. He had taken pains with his appearance. His beard trimmed, his cuirass polished, his helmet's rim rubbed with oil until it threw back the torchlight. He bowed deeply, his eyes darting once to Littlefinger and once to the place where Renly Baratheon would have stood, had he not removed himself from the room as neatly as a stain removed from silk. Allard Deem stood at Slynt's shoulder, his boil scabbed, his mouth set in the mulish line of a man who believes he knows better than his face suggests. "Your Grace," Slynt said. "My Lord Hand." He let the second title carry a note of compatriot's warmth. "The City Watch keeps the peace." "The City Watch takes coin," Stannis said. "We will see if it can keep anything at all." He gestured with an economy of motion that did not expend a finger more than he must. 2 guards brought forward a sack. Kedge followed, stiff-backed, with a small hard pride he did not try to hide. Tomard had the rat-catcher's knife in his hand wrapped in cloth, held between finger and thumb like a thing he did not wish to let touch him. Ned stood with them, and when he looked at Janos Slynt, he thought briefly of winter wolves around a cache in the snow and a fat raccoon with grease on its muzzle and the certainty of what must be done. Kedge put his boot upon the sack and tipped it. A spill of coins rang upon the floor loud as small bells. The lion stamped proud on everyone. The room's breath changed. Slynt let his lips loosen. "We all have coin with lions on it," he said lightly, as a man might say, "We all have wives with eyes." "Not all," Ned said. "Some of us have coin with a flaming heart." He touched the pouch at his belt where Stannis's seal wax had cooled. This came from a guild hall south of the fish market. This was in a man's mouth when Kedge pulled it free. This was in the bottom of a drain. This... He reached down and picked up one of the coins. It glinted dully in the hall's light. He set it upon the edge of the step. was on the table in a brothel in the street of Silk where Aller Deem here likes to spend his evenings threatening girls who do not like his boil. Aller half lunged before he knew he was moving. Ser Barristan's sword was in his hand with the speed of an old habit men do not lose until their last breath. The point kissed Aller's throat without breaking the skin. The man froze, his eyes fish-furious and suddenly aware of water. Janos Slint went very still. He had always been a man quick to take, slow to be taken. "Your Grace," he began. Stannis raised his hand and lowered it. The movement was small. Men heard its weight. "You are removed from your command," he said. "You will go to the wall and take the black." Slint did not understand for 3 heartbeats that felt to Ned like 3 small centuries. His mouth opened and closed. Men in the room looked at one another with the hunger of onlookers at an execution who hope the man will say something noble, so they can tell the tale later as if they had been near nobility. Slint found his voice. "I have served. You have sold." Stannis cut him off. "The law is not a cart you hitch to the purse that pays best. The city watch is my guard. You sell my guard, you make yourself a thief of something that belongs to the city. The penalty in the old books is death. Lord Stark thinks that men should learn better. I am content to send you where men learn to stand in the cold and look at their own souls. If you return, you will return with mine enemies. Then I will hang you and be done." A murmur went through the hall, surprised, approving in places, openly displeased in one corner where a cluster of captains of the watch stood with faces as blank as shields. The blankness meant calculation. It meant Slint's coin had not reached them, or had reached them and not convinced them. Aller Deem made a sound as if his throat were tightening under Barristan's unblooded blade. "And him?" he forced out, eyes bulging. "His boil can go to the stranger," Stannis said with the lack of expression for which his face had been made. "You have a rope," he told Tomard, and Tomard nodded. Ned saw the way Aller's eyes flicked to Slint and back. He saw something like comprehension travel through the man's face, and then the kind of stubbornness that keeps dogs chained their whole lives. He did not hope or fear for the man after that. There are men who carry their own nooses kindly when they are handed the rope. Littlefinger's smile had thinned to nothing, a cut scarcely visible in a clean sheet of parchment. Varys's lashes were lowered. If he smiled, it was inward, at a neatness he admired. Pycelle looked stricken and thought of leeches because that was what he always thought of when men were punished. Kedge stood with his jaw set and watched the men watch. When Slint was taken away, the noise in the hall changed to the sound men make when they rehearse telling their wives what they have seen and what they thought of it and what they did about it. There would be many dinners with loud voices that night, and many with quiet ones. Both are the ways a city learns. In the holdfast that evening, Cersei listened to a song sung low by a woman with a good throat and no gift for poetry, who had been paid with a handful of silver and 3 lines of instruction written in a hand no one would recognize because it was trying too hard to be poor. The song told of a wolf and a stag and a lioness in a cage, but made the lioness sound foolishly proud and the wolf noble and weary, and Cersei smiled at the foolishness of it and let the woman think the smile was for her voice. "You may sing it where the washerwomen gather," she said. "You may sing it where the men drink. Remember to weep on the 3rd verse." "I always weep on the 3rd verse," the woman said eagerly. "It is about the mother. It is about the child," Cersei corrected. "You will learn to weep better." She sat later with Myrcella and taught her a new stitch and watched her daughter's hands move in the lamp's steady light. It soothed her in a way she would not have thanked anyone for noticing. Joffrey had sulked himself to an ugly sleep. Tommen dreamed of kittens and woke with a damp cheek and laughed when he saw his mother and did not know whether to be sorry or pleased. Sandor stood and said nothing and saw everything and made a note on the list in his mind of the guard, whose mouth watered when the queen held a piece of sugared orange and did not offer it to him. On the day after Janos Slint was taken down to the river where a boat waited to carry him to the ship that would take him to Eastwatch, under guard, under oath, under a sky that had decided to be as clear and cruel as it could, Arya Stark woke before Syrio Farrell came and practiced her steps alone in the little place where the light fell soft and made the dust visible. She whispered the names of the men who had not frightened her yesterday and meant to see whether they could frighten her today. When Sirio came he nodded, as if he had expected to find her thus. "You will step with the city," he told her. "You must learn its rhythm. A city breathes through holes you cannot see. Do not put your foot in the wrong hole. You will fall and a rat will laugh." "A rat?" Arya muttered, and grinned despite herself. "I would like to see a rat laugh." "It laughs inside," Sirio said gravely. "It laughs with its whiskers." He tapped her ankle with his stick. "You are a slow mouse this morning. Quicker. Quiet. Cut the wind with your shin and drink its shape." Again. Sansa, across a table with a ribbon and a piece of paper upon it, and a heart that made the paper feel heavier than it should, wrote another letter. She wrote to her mother, and to the idea of her mother she had carried in her head, since she was a little girl with needles pricking her fingers and tears of frustration that Septa Mordain had kissed away. She wrote of the heat and the smell of oranges, of the way the city was beautiful and wicked in the same breath, of the way Princess Myrcella made a knot with her tongue between her teeth the way Sansa did herself, and how that had made her feel less alone for a moment. She wrote the name Joffrey once, and then looked at it a long time and put the quill down and did not pick it up again for a count of 100, as if the number were a penance she could assign herself. Then she crossed the name out and wrote it again smaller. She did not give that letter to Tomard. She folded it and hid it under her pillow, because there are letters a girl writes to learn what she thinks and letters a girl writes to be read. She was not yet certain which kind this was. On the 5th night after the crowning, the queen tried the first of the doors that were not gates. It was a servant's door, narrow and low, near the buttery where air ran cool along the stones. A door that had been cut a century ago when some steward had convinced a lord that food moved more quickly when men moved less obviously. Cersei had learned it in her first months in the castle as a girl with eyes open and a brother's laughter in her ear. She had stored the knowledge as she stored all things, dry and neat and ready to be taken out without anyone hearing the coffer's lid move. She did not go herself. That would have been foolish. She sent a maid with a basket and a letter hidden in the straw beneath a napkin that had been embroidered by a woman of the Rock whose fingers had been pricked for the honor. The letter was one line only. It had a name and a place and the word tonight. The maid had the glassy calm of a woman who had been paid to be brave and thought herself worthy of the pay. A boy with a boil on his ear would have met her at the bend of the passage and said a word he had been told to say, except that the boy lay in a ditch outside the city and the word had died with him. Instead, Kedge stood in the bend as a man stands when he wants a drink and is told he must wait his turn. He turned his shoulder so the maid would have to brush past him if she meant to go through. He looked down into the basket without touching anything and smiled at the sight of grapes he would never eat. "My mother will be glad," he said. "She likes the smell of good baskets. She says they smell of homes where the wind comes in from the sea." The maid blanched, because the wind in her home came from a tannery, and because she did not know how to answer a kindness she had not been paid to account for. "I brought food," she said, as if the words might become a rope thrown across. "For the queen." "She has food," Kedge said. "She is the queen, and she is my prisoner." He reached into the basket and lifted the napkin with 2 fingers. The letter lay like a spider. He took it and smiled again and let the napkin go. "Ah! Another mouth in the holdfast is fed tonight." The woman swallowed. She had been told to cry if this happened. Her tears would be better than any story she could make with her mouth. She could not do it. She was dry and frightened and angry instead, and that made her uglier than her employers had accounted for. She ran. Kedge watched her go. He took the letter to Ned and said nothing about his mother. Ned did not ask. He burned the letter and sat watching the smoke rise as if it might spell something true. It did not. Smoke seldom does. When Cersei learned that the letter had disappeared, she did not slap the maid. She did not shout. She sat and braided Myrcella's hair. She put the braid around her daughter's head and fastened it with a pin that had a pearl smaller than her smallest fingernail and bent low and kissed the hair where the pin lay. "We will try another door," she said presently, as if saying we will try another ribbon. Myrcella, who had not been told anything, nodded and thought her mother was speaking of the pin. "Yes," she said dutifully. "This one is good, though." "It is," Cersei agreed. She looked to the window, where the screen made a lattice of shadow. It is good to do a thing properly. On the 6th day, a raven from White Harbor came back to the Red Keep with a ribbon of manderly fat stuck to its leg like a boast. Lord Wyman's hand, round and merry-looking, had given back more than it had been asked for. Bread promised for the city, fish salted and barreled for the guards, a gift of flour for the seps, a suggestion that White Harbor would be honored to bake the first loaves for a king's feast when the king chose to eat as kings should. He had written Your Grace to Stannis and my Lord Stark to Ned in the correct order and had written to Sansa as well. Somebody in the Maester's Tower knew how to please women, and enclosed a small recipe for lemon cakes that called for a quantity of eggs that made the cook who read it laugh aloud in disbelief. "It's like a high-born letter trying to be a pie," Ned said when Davos read it with his finger tracing the lines. "But it feeds. Lord Manderly loves to feed," Davos said. "It puts him in a better humor than song." "Then feed him too," Ned said, with words and a promise of thanks written larger later. Davos nodded and went to the river again with a smile that had more teeth in it than yesterday. Men like to feel they are not only ferrying loaves but ferrying goodwill. In the Riverlands the same day, a rider in Tully colors splashed across the Red Fork with red on his sleeve that was not all the river's doing and came to Riverrun to shout that Ser Edmure had flung men at the Lannister lines again and come back with fewer. Brynden Blackfish took the news with a face as flat as slate. "We will send letters and not men," he said, "because we have neither men to spare nor paper to waste on writing the words foolish. Your cousin will heal better if he has to sit on his arse in pain." Catelyn, hearing the report, kept her lips pressed together until the lines about them whitened and then went to sit with Hoster by a window where the light made the dust seem holy and thought of her father's hands as they had been in her childhood, large and fine-boned, capable of catching a trout with their bare strength. In Winterfell, Robb Stark called the banners. He did it in the hall where the hearth smoke went up straight as a promise, and the words took the shape of his mouth well even though they were heavy. "My Lord Father is in King's Landing doing law," he said to the men who came to stand and listen with the honest impatience of men who would rather be out measuring grain or checking a mare's hoof. "The Riverlands burn. We will go." He did not shout. He did not have to. The great John laughed, loud and louder, not in scorn. In approval a man will not say with whispers. "There's the boy," he boomed, "and he has a wolf in his belly and a man at his back." He slapped his sword on the table and shouted for ale and cried that he would be the first to cross the neck, and old Ser Roderick tugged his whiskers and said that if the boy was going he would go too and cut the throat of any man who thought to teach Robb any lesson by killing him. Maester Luwin wrote letters with a hand that had known what it was writing before it wrote it, and ravens went up out of the maester's turret into air that was clean enough to cut. Stannis read one of those letters in King's Landing and grunted a sound that might have been approval and might have been simple acknowledgement of a board laid straight. "The boy marches," he said. "Good. He is the right hand of the law in the north. Let him feel it in his wrist." He signed a notation that would encourage men at the Dreadfort to look to Winterfell's banner first and not their own implements of flaying. "We will not have Boltons imagining loopholes." Ned looked at the signature, neat and spare, and thought of the way Stannis wielded the law the way a smith uses a rasp, to take away the unnecessary, even if the shape it leaves is not the one a man would have chosen for beauty. On the 8th day, the most devout met to choose a new High Septon. It would be a matter of weeks normally. They liked to take their time to weigh and pray and balance and sell, but Varys had been very busy with little boys. Her head as if she had lit a fire anyway and was content to let the coals live in her eyes. She looked at Ned and smiled, and he did not return it. He had no quarrel with her he could name yet, and he would not begin one out of distaste. On the 30th day after Robert's death, the city, which had been counting time by rumor and heartbeat, began to count again by bells. It did not riot. It did not cheer. It did not die. It did what cities do when men with swords stand at their gates and at their windows and at the mouths of their drains. It learned the new paths by which the day moves and used them. There were still knives in the buttery. There were still coins with lions on them under things. There were still songs that had to be unlearned. There were also loaves and law, and a queen with her hand on her daughter's head telling her that pins must be sharp and that if she did not learn to put them in cleanly she would be sent to bed. a lie any mother tells when she knows she will never have the heart to keep it. There was a boy with a wooden sword and a teacher who had taught better pupils and worse and loved none more than his own lessons. There was a man with a burned face who fed a cat half his bread and told no one. There was a king who did not smile and a hand who did not promise what he could not deliver. And beyond all of that, out upon roads that ran to places where men had not yet sorted themselves into rows, Tywin Lannister sat his horse and held a letter with Stannis's name upon it, and did not let his face alter by as much as a breath. He did not think of Cersei in a cage. He did not think of children. He thought of castles and names and the way a man's blood could be made into a rope to pull a city down. "We will make him come out," he said. "We will make them come from their gates to save the things they say they love. Keep burning. Keep buying. Keep singing." He looked south and saw in his mind a field full of flowers and a smiling boy with a crown, and he did not smile. "Let the flowers cover the pit," he said. "We will ride round it." In the last light of that day, when the hawk returned at last and made a circle above the red keep so wide that only it could see the circle hole, Ned stood in his window and let the dusk's heat press against his forearms and knew only this: that tomorrow there would be a new door tried that was not a gate, that he would rise and bar it, that the law would hold because men chose to hold it, that he would spend himself piece by piece if he had to make the choice easier for them. The river drew a line in the fading light. The city breathed. He had never prayed much at night to gods he could not see. He did not begin now. He set his hand upon the stone and felt it warm under his palm and thought, as he had thought every night since this began: "Not today. Not while I stand." By the 31st morning after Robert's death, the Red Keep had learned the shape of Stannis's rule, the way a man learns a saddle that is not comfortable but keeps him upon the horse. Orders came crisp and unsentimental. Men who had been noisy for noise's sake found themselves put to work counting spears or barrels of salt cod, and discovered their tongues grew less clever when their hands were busy. The court said, "Your Grace," some gladly and some as if holding a lemon seed under the tongue to keep from spitting. Ned took to meeting with the captains of the watch at dawn before the city's talk had found its stride. Janos Slint was already on the road under guard with a face like boiled fat that had set. Aller Deem swung where Stannis had pointed. The city had looked and then, mercifully, looked away, as cities do when a lesson displeases them and they mean to say afterward that they had never needed it. For command of the watch, names had been put forward. One of Slint's thick-fingered favorites, a man from the Hook with a sailor's lurch, a captain who smiled too easily. Ned set them aside and sent for the one he wanted. Ser Jacelyn Bywater had a face like a rock worn smooth by rain, and an eye that did not look to the left when a purse glittered on the right. He knelt as if kneeling were an act of standing in a different way and rose as if that mattered not at all. "You will take the gold cloaks," Ned said, handing him the baton of command. "You will pay them, feed them, and hang them as needed. The city breathes too close to our faces. Give it a little space without letting it believe it can turn its head away." Bywater's mouth made the faintest suggestion of a smile, a crack in stone that might be a vein of quartz. "Aye, my lord." He did not look at Littlefinger, who had learned to look at every man who took a baton, nor at Varys, who already knew how he would walk. "I will have a list of men who do not have a second purse under their pillow by sup." "Bring me a list of those who do," Ned said, "and a list of those who do not wish me to have the first list." Bywater inclined his head. It was a pleasure to hand a tool to a man who would use it for the work intended. He set Bywater to the gates and kept Kedge at the bridge and Tomard at the inner doors to Cersei's rooms. The queen did not rage at the change. She counted faces instead, made note of teeth and scars and unguarded mouths, and adjusted. On one afternoon she asked Bywater his name without apparent reason, and when he told her she said, "Bywater indeed," with a small curl of the lip that might have been wit. Bywater did not respond. He had not come for wit. Letters ran like streams. To Storm's End, Stannis sent a call with a command in it: "Come to your liege or stand against him openly." The answer came back in Courtenay Penrose's tight, uncompromising hand, polite and unyielding as stone. Storm's End would hold for Stannis, he wrote, because the castle held itself. It kept no man who was false to its lord. Edric Storm, Robert's bastard, was safe within and would be safe until the king came himself to claim him in person. I hold the boy for your grace, Penrose wrote, using the title with an elegance that made it cut a little. Not for your lady in red or any fire she brings. Melisandre's smile when she read that line was not for human eyes. But Ned saw Stannis's hand flatten upon the edge of the table as if to keep it from tightening into a fist. I will go when the riverlands are steadied, he said, and when Renly's flowers have been pruned. The Reach bloomed Renly's name as if he had been born in its fields. Rumors turned from soft to full-bodied. A wedding feast at Highgarden lasted 3 days. A crown with a circlet of golden roses had been made to sit upon a handsome boy's black hair and set off his green velvet. Marjorie's smile changed the air in rooms. Mace Tyrell counted and found that he had more than enough to sound generous while giving little. Lords who had never liked reading the small print of law liked the letters Renly sent that spoke of easy tax and double harvests and dances with long tables and longer favors. A realm is not a feast, Stannis said when the reports came. It is a fast with meat at need. He wrote back not to the Reach but to the Stormlands, Lord Cairn of Nightsong, Lord Estermont on his rocky perch, Lord Swan at Stonehelm, Lord Selmy in a hall that had a white cloak on its wall and a farmer's patience in its fields. Your oath is to your liege, he wrote. Not to a smile. Come. Some did. Not many. They sent letters that apologized for delays and spoke of harvests almost in and sons almost of age and roads almost passable after the last rains. I have never lived in a world with so many almosts, Stannis said flatly. It seems I must make a world of actuals. He sent Davos down coast to Driftmark and Claw Isle and up to Saltpans to count what sails would come when a man asked in the name of law and not laughter. Davos returned with numbers that comforted no one and a face sunburned by an honest wind. I'll fetch what's there, he said. But if Renly brings the Mander and Redwine both, you'll have fields of white canvas on your horizon and not all of them friendly. We will chain the river, Stannis said.
Ned blinked.
Chain? Davos scratched his cheek. I've seen it done. In the east at Myr. You lay iron from tower to tower and sink anchors and haul it when you need to catch ships like fish. It's dear work and slow, and smiths will curse you for the iron you steal from horses' shoes and hinges. But it keeps what you have behind your walls. It kept Myr, Stannis said. I will have it here. Send for the Guild of Smiths. Take the chain Tobo Mott has been making for a Myrish lord, who will not come to collect it now, and melt it into what I need. Set every forge to smoke. If I see a shirt of mail made without my leave before the chain is finished, I will set the smith to the bellows himself until his beard burns. He looked at Ned. You dislike the thought. I dislike the thought of needing it, Ned said. But I have learned to dislike many necessary things. Set the forges. They set them. The city took the sound into its pulse. Hammers marked time in the lower streets, and men in the street of steel, who had been paid by nobles to tie pommels, prettily sweated for the first pure work they had done in a decade. Tobo Mott, flattered by honest need, put his apprentices to carrying coal and instructed a boy with dark hair and blue eyes. A long-faced lad with a stubborn set to his jaw, not yet a man, quick with a file, to mind the temper of the iron with care. Not too fast, Gendry, he said. This is not a knife that can be ground thin and sharpened each week. This must hold the weight of those who think they are too heavy to be moved. The boy did not answer. He did the work. He had a way of looking at metal that made metal decide to be what he wanted. Littlefinger made coin appear and disappear in columns like a man doing a trick with cups, and Varys brought names to Ned the way a physician brings fevers. Quietly, accurately, too often. This cellarman hears the lions at night in his sleep, he murmured, indicating a man who had done nothing yet. This maid sleeps with her mistress's jewel coffer one night in 5 and goes pale when asked why. This captain has a broth he feeds men who will do anything. This old woman buys more saffron than any pie could account for. Ned took the names and gave them to Bywater and Tomard and Desmond with instructions measured to each. He had learned the city's pressure points as one learns a horse's. He pressed gently with a sure hand. In the holdfast, Cersei listened to the hoofbeats and measured the rhythm of her cage with a cynic's ear. Some nights she woke and went to the screen and watched the square of sky given her. She did not pray. She thought of Jaime instead, in the west, in a country of fire and river and iron, smiling the way he smiled when he stood at the edge of an opening and pretended he did not mean to jump and did. She thought of her father's eyes when told that his daughter sat in a tower with guards at door and window. She thought of knives that had not found their throats and of knives that had. She thought of Sansa Stark and of what a child could be made to forgive and designed, one night, a forgiveness so fine it could be folded into a letter without adding to its weight. "You will be loved," she wrote to no one and to everyone. "Remember what that costs." In the morning she burned it. On the 35th day, Tyrion Lannister reached his father's camp under Harrenhal with the mountain clans at his back. A dust-streaked dwarf with more dirt than wine upon him and laughter in him still. He brought tales of the Vale and the Eyrie and a woman who had set trials upon a sky. He brought counsel, and Tywin listened because Tywin listened to counsel that did not flatter him, and because Tyrion's pawns often became unexpectedly valuable pieces. "Stannis sits with the hand's wolf," Tyrion said, after he had eaten and drunk and laughed and looked into his father's eyes without the least success at moving them. "They have the queen in a gilded cage. If you starve the riverlands until the wolves cry to be fed, the wolf in the city will hear them, and the stag will want to go hunting. But Stannis will hold him. He is the sort who thinks hunger is an educational tool." "You have seen Stannis hungry," Tywin said, with no trace of humor. "I have seen Stannis at supper," Tyrion returned. "The effect is similar." He leaned back. "Renly puts on a crown made of flowers and thinks it an iron cap. He will draw men like wine draws flies. You can swat flies or you can cover your cup. Cover your cup. Let him come. Let him set his pavilion within sight of the walls. Then send a polite letter to Highgarden and say, 'We will see whose grain is left when we are done.' Mace Tyrell never starves himself. He starves others. Threaten his belly and he will think of the sea." Tywin's fingers drummed the table once. "You will go to King's Landing," he said. "The city likes men who talk and juggle. Stannis will not let them. You will. There is a need for someone who will lie to them with panache. You will keep the lions from being made into cats in the street. You will keep Stannis from burning the wrong things. You will keep Lord Stark from cutting the throats we need uncut." Tyrion considered this with the gravity of a man who would rather have a cup and a song than a baton and a noose. "You send me into a lion's den," he observed, "with no lioness to protect me. Stannis will have me beheaded in the name of the law while he eats a crust of bread and thinks he has improved the world's virtue thereby." "Then do not be beheaded," Tywin said, and returned to his papers. The raven that carried that letter arrived in the red keep at dusk, ragged, as if it had been chased by others. It bore Tywin's seal and a tone that made Peter Baelish smile so thinly that it might have been mistaken for delight by a man who had never seen him smile at all. Stannis read it without change of face. "He sends the dwarf," he said. "Good. He will think him a jester and not an ally. He will be wrong. Make the dwarf sleep in a tower with a guard at his door and a guard at his window and a guard under his bed for all I care. But let him speak." He glanced to Ned. "I do not know what he will say. That is your sort of work." "It is everyone's sort of risk," Ned answered. "I will hear him. If he brings blood in his mouth with his jokes, I will have him spit it out on the floor." They received Tyrion in a small chamber with a window that showed only a slice of sky and a bit of roof. He bowed elaborately to Stannis and less elaborately to Ned. "Your Grace," he said with a flourish that mocked itself. "My lord hand. I bring my head upon my neck. I have grown attached to it. I would like to keep it. If either of you has a son who wishes to remove it for sport, tell him he must cut quick, because I cannot hold still long when men breathe heavily behind me." "Your head remains," Stannis said. "Your tongue will remain if you keep it behind your teeth unless asked for. Speak." Tyrion shrugged. "Very well. I am here to tell you that my sister loves you and my father respects you and my brother would kill you if he were here not because you are wrong but because it would please him. Consider me the least dangerous of the three." He sketched a grin. "I would rather talk. The city is a pot on a fire, as I am sure the Onion Knight will have told you in more nautical terms. You have prevented it boiling over so far by not stirring too vigorously. But a man cannot leave a pot forever. If you keep the Lannister kittens in a cage much longer, men will gather to watch the cage and forget to watch the gate. If you let them loose, they will run and lead dogs back to your door. Ned studied him. The dwarf was everything men said, glib, shameless, quick. But there was a mind under the curls, and a kind of sympathy for human weakness he had not expected. "What do you propose?" he asked. Tyrion spread his hands. "You have a boy who is not a king, a girl who is a lady by any measure and could be a queen for a different boy in a different story, a true heir who eats bread like law, and a realm that likes to be told it is pretty. You could send the girl south. Dorne has a prince with a son who needs a bride. You could send the boy west to a sept where he will eat porridge and learn letters and be safe from his own mouth. You could send my sister to Casterly Rock with an escort of men who would cut off their own hands rather than leave her in a roadside ditch. You could say you do this in the name of the realm and the gods, and some would believe you. My father would not attack while my sister sailed. He would cut half his men open before he let a gust of wind decide whether he had a grandson in his hall." "Dorne," Stannis said, and made the words sound like a stone dropped into a barrel. Ned's mind moved there at once. He had thought of it and set it aside because to think it was to begin to admit he would trade a child. He found that he had less taste for absolute refusals than he had had a month ago. "Dor and Martell would take Myrcella," he said, hearing how speaking it made it more real. He would be patient about it. He would keep his word. He would use it, too, as is his way. "As is every man's," Tyrion said joyfully. "We never would without an eye to the fire." He tilted his head. "Send her with honor. Send her with a dowry written in law that cannot be made untrue by a later king's whim. Send her with a guard that answers to you and to her mother's pride. My sister will swallow it because she can call it a victory later when it pleases her. My father will have to think. He does not like thinking when he is marching." Stannis looked at Ned. It was the sort of look Stannis gave, without warmth, without needing anything, only asking for judgment the way a carpenter asks if the beam is true. Ned's stomach turned once and then settled. "I will speak to the queen," he said. "You would take my daughter," Cersei said, very mild, when he came. She had Myrcella's hair between her fingers, straightening a strand that needed no straightening. "You would send her to the sand and call it safety." "I would send her to a prince," Ned said, and did not dress it more than that, "who will keep her safe or lose his own honor when the realm learns he did not. She will have a husband who will treat her with all the courtesies Dorne insists upon when it insists upon anything. Your daughter will be a princess not only by name." Cersei's fingers stilled. "You will put her on a boat," she said in that same calm. "And if the boat sinks? If the wind turns? If the food spoils? In the days when I was young I dreamed of adventures and ships. I learned better. The sea is a liar. Better a liar than a step with Lannister blood under every foot of this city," Ned said. "You know your father. If he believes she is safe, he waits. He plays for time. Time is a thing we can use." Cersei looked at Myrcella, not at Ned. "Do you wish to marry a prince of Dorne?" she asked, and Myrcella's eyes widened because she was old enough to understand the shape of the words and young enough to think of golden stories and orange blossom and white towers and not of political arithmetic. "If you command it, mother," she said softly. Cersei shut her eyes for a very long breath. When she opened them, they were clear. "You will send her," she said, "and you will swear to me by your gods that you will not betray her on the water. If I hear the ship did not reach the Boneway, if I hear that you put her on a ship with rotten planks and men who drink in their watch, Ned Stark, I will—" She stopped, because threat meant to be said without hope.